6 of 81. Wear more clothes when it's cold. After the meeting, Mu Yue planned to return to his office, but Hiruzen Sarutobi summoned him to the Hokage's chamber. Hiruzen sighed as soon as they were alone. I lost to Sosuke, he admitted. His power exceeded everything I expected. It isn't an exaggeration to say he's the strongest shinobi in the world right now. Mu Yue had his own credentials. He'd grievously wounded the Kazekage with a single punch and could form a 60-meter-tall wood-human technique, but even so he still fell short of Senju Hashirama. Sosuke, however, gave Hiruzen the impression of being very close to a legend like Hashirama. That's why Hiruzen believed Sosuke, not Mu Yue, to be the current pinnacle. I was impulsive, Hiruzen continued, remorse plain on his face. I should have listened to you. For Hiruzen, the loss was more than a failure on the battlefield. It was a strategic mistake. If he hadn't provoked Sosuke, Konoha could have calmly reaped the benefits of the Third Shinobi World War, and Mu Yue could have continued developing in safety. Mu Yue tried to console him. What's done is done. We should look forward. If there was a mistake, the higher-ups aren't immune either. Maybe if we had been more persistent and forceful. His words were genuine. He had been harsh in the fight, and although he hadn't left Hiruzen with any irreparable physical injuries, the defeat likely stung. Hiruzen, after all, was still one of the top fighters of the era. To be beaten without even touching his opponent, despite giving his all, would bruise a man's pride. Hearing Mu Yue's sincerity, Hiruzen allowed himself to be a little moved. Even old comrades like Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado felt a trace of resentment, but Mu Yue's frankness and willingness to share the blame comforted him. He's not weaker than me anymore, but he still remembers the kindness I showed him, Hiruzen thought. Mu Yue truly recalled his favors. I did learn some things about Sosuke, Hiruzen said, shifting to the battle's details. He has a ninjutsu that forms a shield around his body. It can withstand taijutsu and ninjutsu, but it must have a limit. When I used the 5 great consecutive shots, he nullified my ninjutsu with some other method. Mu Yue listened, nodding occasionally. The limitless curse technique, forming an infinity around a user, could act like a shield. It wasn't absolute. He suspected Sosuke hadn't simply blocked the 5 great consecutive shots. He wanted to use Sukuna Hikona to amplify the pressure. To break something like Limitless, 5 great consecutive shots wouldn't suffice. A truth-seeking ball or a 6-path sage art would be needed. Until the election is over, you shouldn't leave the village, Hiruzen ordered. Sosuke was powerful, but Konoha still had many formidable shinobi. United, they might contend with him, and Sosuke's chakra was not infinite. If Mu Yue left, the risk would grow. Hiruzen couldn't risk whether Sosuke might strike later. Letting them go now might have been a ruse to lull Konoha into lowering its guard. Mu Yue growing stronger later could change the balance. Mu Yue agreed. Limitless was excellent for long-distance travel. Its consumption wasn't excessive, and the range was vast, so Hiruzen's order didn't surprise him. Oh, and we'll arrange an exclusive interview with you in the Leaf newspaper, Hiruzen added. Technically, he'd still need to issue the order, but it made sense. Mu Yue's wartime contributions warranted public recognition, regardless of Hokage succession. Mu Yue thanked him and left. Hiruzen took a pipe from his pocket, puffed out a thin plume of smoke, and allowed himself a moment of relief before returning to official business. He was still Hokage until the handover. When Hiruzen finished work and went home, Asuma had just come back from the training grounds and was lounging in a chair. "You're back," Asuma said. Hiruzen nodded, removed his Hokage hat, and put it away. Conversation was sparse. Asuma had nothing pressing to say, and Hiruzen had things he couldn't yet act off. During dinner, Hiruzen spoke of his recent workload with Sarutobi Bawako. "I've been busy evaluating and discussing shinobi who contributed to the village. Meetings have been endless." "You should rest," Asuma replied. "You're no spring chicken. I'm the Hokage. These matters must be handled personally. I'll be busy again soon. I still need to contact the daimyo." "Daimyo?" Asuma's fork paused. The daimyo didn't usually concern day-to-day village affairs, so hearing the word piqued his curiosity. "What's so important it needs the daimyo?" "Eat," Hiruzen said, shutting the conversation down. "Your rank isn't high enough to know." The curt answer annoyed Asuma. Even if it were true, he was Hiruzen's son. Shouldn't he be trusted? As the meal finished, Asuma replayed Hiruzen's words in his head. Hiruzen had denied the succession publicly the day before, but his tone and the stray comments at dinner suggested otherwise. Hiruzen had even hinted that Mu Yue might have less time with him in the future. A thought crystallized. Could the fourth Hokage election be imminent? Excited and a little reckless, Asuma slipped the Hokage hat Hiruzen had set aside into a scroll and left. He told himself borrowing it briefly wouldn't hurt. Hiruzen, on his way out, spotted the empty shelf and grimaced. He had hoped to tip Asuma off, have him tell Mu Yue indirectly, because Mu Yue already knew about the nomination, and Asuma didn't. From the public view, the Hokage would usually announce such nominations at a jonin meeting. Asuma being in the dark made him an honest messenger and would make Mu Yue think well of him. Asuma went straight to Mu Yue's home in the main district. When he knocked and entered, Obito and Shisui were there. Shisui was consulting Mu Yue about Uchiha matters, while Obito chatted with some strange winged creature with an onion-shaped head. "Mu Yue-sensei, good evening," Asuma greeted. "Come in, sit," Mu Yue replied with a smile. Asuma walked up behind Mu Yue, retrieved the hat from the scroll, and placed it on Mu Yue's head. "Sensei, it's cold. Time to wear a hat," he said, trying for solemnity. Mu Yue's expression flickered at the unexpected prop. "Hokage hat?" Obito's eyes went wide. He immediately fumbled for his camera and snapped a picture. Two faint bursts of chakra tapped Asuma and Obito lightly on the head as Mu Yue quickly removed the hat. He had no special obsession with being Hokage. "Asuma, where did you get that custom made?" "It's exactly like the Hokage's," Obito asked, rubbing his head. Asuma laughed evasively. It wasn't custom made, it was genuinely Hiruzen's hat. Shisui's brow tightened. Who would dare make a fake of the Hokage's hat? Considering Asuma's actions, Shisui assumed it was the real thing. Asuma tucked the hat back into the scroll, not planning to leave it there long. Seeing Asuma hesitate, Mu Yue suggested, "There are some documents I keep upstairs. You can look through them." Asuma decided to speak plainly. Even though he'd initially wanted to keep the information to as few people as possible, Obito and Shisui were trustworthy and could help with the election. "It looks like you might be nominated for fourth Hokage," he said. "Tsunade could also be a candidate. If she's nominated, the result will be hard to predict. We should start preparing now." Obito brightened instantly. "Fourth Hokage. If Mu Yue-sensei becomes Hokage, Konoha will soar." "You said might, but you sound like it's a done deal," Mu Yue teased, lightly knocking Obito's head. "It's because I trust you," Obito grinned. Shisui also nodded. Mu Yue's popularity in Konoha was immense, perhaps even greater than Minato Namikaze's in the original timeline. But Tsunade posed a real threat. She had powerful lineage, vast connections from her medical work, and a storied wartime reputation. "If we know now, we can prepare," Asuma said, blunt and practical. "Start gathering support. Hide a stone inscribed Konoha prospers, Mu Yue becomes Hokage, inside a fish carcass," Obito blurted excitedly. "Hold a reunion of all Y, our former students, and rally them behind you." Shisui nodded at that last suggestion. Organize and consolidate allies. They all felt the same. If the election was coming, they needed to act. Chapter 682. Overwhelming Votes. The conference room in the Hokage building was full. Dozens of Konoha jonin in uniform sat around the long table. A jonin at the doorway frowned. "Is something big happening? Why are so many of us called?" Usually only the notified jonin attended these meetings. Anbu and specially designated jonin came even less often. When everyone had settled, Hiruzen Sarutobi, seated at the head of the table, cleared his throat and drew the room's attention. "Following the will of the second Hokage, I have served to protect the village for decades. Time flies. My hair has grayed, my bones have grown weak, the courage of my youth is gone, and even the wisdom of the past needs fresh thought to carry it forward. The office of Hokage is not the glory of one person. It is Konoha's weighty burden, and it must be held by someone capable. Only then can Konoha's peace be preserved, the will of fire passed on, and our sprouts protected. Therefore, I have made up my mind. I will step down from the heavy responsibility of Hokage in the near future and hand the position to a rising talent." He exhaled softly, lifted his cup, and sipped water. Hiruzen rarely used such ceremony in routine meetings, but this was his abdication, a moment that deserved formality. A ripple of shock ran through the room. Aside from Homura Mitokado, Utatane Koharu, and a couple of others who had been told beforehand, the Jonin were stunned. Even Orochimaru, who knew Hiruzen had recently been bested, looked surprised. Losing to a junior might be humiliating, but it didn't necessarily demand resignation, especially since Sosuke had restrained himself and left Konoha unharmed. Hiruzen could have buried the incident. Why this sudden decision? Nara Shikaku's eyes narrowed. He didn't buy old age and frailty as the whole story. Hiruzen was not that decrepit. Onoki was older and still served as Tsuchikage. Tsunade glanced toward Mu Yue and frowned. Mu Yue's popularity in Konoha had risen markedly since the Third Shinobi World War. It was not impossible he would be nominated, but Tsunade didn't relish the idea. If Mu Yue became Hokage, would he still have time and energy to cook? Jiraiya and she had both refused the role. They were unlikely candidates. With Mu Yue present, most suspected he would be one of the contenders. Hiruzen folded his hands. Orochimaru is one of Konoha's famed sannin. He has carried out missions diligently, completed many high-difficulty commissions, and brought great benefits and reputation to Konoha. For these reasons and the positive changes he might bring, the high-level meeting has decided to nominate Orochimaru as a candidate for fourth Hokage. Applause filled the room. Orochimaru's exploits in both wars were well known. His nomination was expected. Hiruzen continued. During the Third Shinobi World War, many outstanding shinobi rose from Konoha, but Hayate Mugetsu was the most notable. Across the ninja world, he stood out. On numerous occasions, he turned the tide for Konoha. In the final battles, he faced multiple Kage's surprise attacks and held firm, laying the foundation for our victory. After unanimous discussion, the high-level meeting has decided to formally nominate Hayate Mugetsu as a candidate for fourth Hokage. As Hiruzen finished, the room erupted in louder, more enthusiastic applause. Obito, Asuma, and their peers banged the table with approval. Uchiha Fugaku and the other Uchiha exchanged glances and applauded with rare excitement. For the Uchiha, Mu Yue becoming Hokage promised a future that favored their clan and legitimized heirs like Obito and Shisui. With a Hokage teacher and 2 driven students, producing high-ranking officials suddenly seemed very possible. I choose Mu Yue-sensei. He can make us stronger, Obito blurted, visibly thrilled. Obito Jonin, please be quiet, Homura Mitokado warned. Voting here would be by secret ballot. Public declarations would only create awkwardness among comrades and subordinates. Hiruzen announced the next steps. Those are the candidates for fourth Hokage. Voting will begin in 5 minutes. The official silence that followed felt tense. At this level, conversations could easily offend. Everyone present was an elite shinobi. Whispers could be overheard. Shisui and his friends brightened hearing the only real opponent was Orochimaru. If the contest had included Tsunade, things would have been complicated. With Mu Yue's current popularity, he already had an edge. Jiraiya, who had returned to Konoha at Hiruzen's summons only a week prior, leaned toward Tsunade. Who will you vote for? Mu Yue. Tsunade replied curtly. She didn't want him as Hokage. She liked her food far too much to risk him getting bogged down in bureaucracy. But she wouldn't throw her vote to Orochimaru either. Orochimaru, in her view, had grown dangerously obsessive about learning all ninjutsu and chasing immortality. Letting a man like that lead Konoha would invite trouble. I plan to abstain, Jiraiya said. He thought Orochimaru unfit too, but didn't want to crush him by voting for Mu Yue. Abstaining was permitted. 5 minutes passed. Ballots were handed out, paper with the 2 candidates' names. To vote, you drew a circle under a name. To abstain, you circled the space between them. Obvious supporters, Obito, Kakashi, many Uchiha, dotted circles under Mu Yue's name at once. Some who had served under Orochimaru in the war, but also seen Mu Yue's special training, quietly chose Mu Yue. Others thought of their children praising Mu Yue and followed suit. When the ballots were collected, Homura Mitokado and Utatane Koharu supervised the count and presented the results to Hiruzen. He frowned slightly. Did you double-check? Any mistakes? We checked 5 times. There are no problems, Homura said. Vote counting was serious business. Multiple checks and high-level supervision prevented disputes. Hiruzen met Orochimaru's gaze with reluctant regret, then turned to the assembled jonin. Orochimaru received 28 votes. Faces went blank. 28 out of more than 160 was far lower than anyone expected for a Sannin of Orochimaru's renown. Many had assumed the contest would be close. Orochimaru's name still carried weight from the Second Shinobi World War. Could it be too many abstentions? Someone murmured, grasping at an explanation. Hiruzen raised his hand. Hayate Mugetsu received 139 votes. Silence fell like a stone. The minority who had voted for Orochimaru looked around in shocked confusion. Those who had voted for Mu Yue glanced at one another in stunned delight. This was an overwhelming win. With the Jonin vote so decisive, it was extremely unlikely the remaining chuunin, genin, or civilian ballots could overturn the result unless Orochimaru's popularity was astronomically higher outside the Jonin ranks. Everyone present knew Orochimaru's standing in Konoha. He had loyal supporters, but nothing compared to Mu Yue's recent prominence. Mu Yue's deeds in the last war and the immediate post-war fame had cemented his position. Uchiha Fugaku allowed a rare, pleased smile. Finally, a Hokage who might favor the Uchiha. With Mu Yue, Obito, and Shisui in the picture, the clan could hope for restored prestige. Obito felt as if the future had already shifted. Mu Yue-sensei is going to be Hokage, he thought, grinning inwardly. He had studied the election rules. The result looked immovable. He felt a pang of apology for Minato Namikaze, someone who, in the original timeline, would have become fourth Hokage but hadn't even been nominated here. Maybe Mu Yue's survival and the battles he'd handled had changed a lot of history. Still, if Obito could choose again and again, he would keep changing things to make sure people he cared about lived. Whoever wore the Hokage's hat mattered less than keeping everyone alive. This time, Naruto shouldn't end up an orphan, right? 683. Influence the Jonin vote results surprised everyone present. Whatever anyone thought, the outcome could not be changed now. In this round of voting, Mu Yue had won by an overwhelming margin. After the meeting, his friends came forward to congratulate him. Mu Yue, you're really on your way. Hokage is within your reach. Kushina crowed, slapping him on the shoulder. Back when she was at the Ninja Academy, Kushina had dreamed of being Hokage too. The idea of becoming Konoha's first female Hokage had appealed to her. She hadn't had any special reason for it. She simply couldn't stomach an ordinary life. It's not certain until the final tally, Mu Yue said, shaking his head. Becoming Hokage wasn't something to celebrate prematurely. We still shouldn't get careless, Minato Namikaze added with a gentle smile. Seeing his friend outpull veterans like the Sannin left Minato a little moved. When Mu Yue had still been a chuunin, he was already a notable jonin. Now Mu Yue was on the brink of the Hokage post, while Minato remained a jonin squad leader. He felt no envy, only admiration. Mu Yue had earned everything by ability and contribution, not by connections. If Minato put himself in Mu Yue's shoes, he couldn't imagine matching that level. I cast my precious vote for you. Isn't a big feast in order to celebrate such a lead? Tsunade said bluntly. Mu Yue nodded. A large gathering now and then would be fine. Jiraiya, who had been jokingly consoling Orochimaru, immediately brightened at the prospect. Even if he returned to Konoha, it would be a shame to miss the chance to freeload off Mu Yue's cooking. Ahem, Orochimaru, seniors must show magnanimity, Jiraiya said, suddenly solemn. Though you and Mu Yue are both in the running for Hokage, it doesn't have to affect your personal relationship. Jiraiya wanted to eat for free. He also didn't want to leave Orochimaru behind, so he dragged him along. When did you get the idea that you can lecture me? Orochimaru replied coolly, and then walked straight to Mu Yue to ask for a meal. Being outvoted by a junior stung his pride a little, but only a little, because that junior was Mu Yue. Orochimaru understood the gap. Mu Yue could seriously wound the fourth Kazekage with a single punch and had developed the rare wood release. He had been Konoha's hero who ended the Third Shinobi World War. Compared to that, Orochimaru's record simply couldn't outshine Mu Yue. Still, they were partners. Mu Yue becoming Hokage would be good for Orochimaru in the long run, even if it wasn't as good as being Hokage himself. And me, Jiraiya piped up, surprised to find even the aloof Orochimaru happy to freeload. When he realized the group had already moved on, he hurried to catch up. Mu Yue also invited his students and disciples, like Asuma and Obito, to dinner. Teacher Mu Yue's cooking never gets old, Obito sighed as they walked back toward the Uchiha compound. I wish the Sharingan could copy this perfectly, so I wouldn't have to trouble teacher Mu Yue and could eat it every day. The Sharingan isn't omnipotent, Shisui said casually. If you actually trained under teacher Mu Yue, maybe you'd get closer. I'll pass, Obito said. I'll learn to cook later when there's nothing left to improve in my strength. He didn't want to waste time cooking now and risk falling behind Kakashi in power, only to be mocked. But teacher Mu Yue has such a huge lead, Obito continued, shifting back to the election. It's such a waste of the brilliant plan I worked so hard on. It doesn't have to be wasted. You could keep it in your pocket for when I run, Shisui replied. Then it's still wasted, isn't it? Obito muttered. Perhaps 1,000 years ago that would have been a brilliant plan worthy of applause, Shisui said dryly. Obito fell silent. When they reached the Uchiha compound, they parted ways. Not long after, Uchiha Fugaku came to Shisui's door. Did you have dinner at Assistant Mu Yue's today? Fugaku asked. He had seen Shisui with Mu Yue's group earlier. Yes, Shisui answered. Assistant T. Mu Yue is very likely to become Hokage this time. We must seize the opportunity, Fugaku said quickly. Once the village begins to follow Assistant Mu Yue's lead, we should push for his policies. First, call the elders together for a meeting. Get them to discuss and reach a consensus before the clan meeting. The Uchiha hadn't been against joining Konoha's core decision-making. They had simply been blocked. Mu Yue enjoyed a superb reputation among the Uchiha. Everyone knew that two of their greatest geniuses had been Mu Yue's disciples. With Mu Yue as a potential Hokage, Fugaku didn't think the elders would oppose the police force reforms anymore. If they did, Fugaku was prepared to use his authority as clan leader. Shisui nodded. Fugaku's proactive stance gave Shisui a new appreciation for the power and prestige of the Hokage. Previously, Fugaku had supported Shisui, but had not acted so assertively. Now, with Mu Yue poised to become Hokage, Fugaku had become far more active. Shisui didn't dislike it. Fugaku was doing what he thought best for the clan. To Shisui, an Uchiha like Fugaku would sooner betray the village than betray the clan. 684. The sixth largest ninja force? Land of Rain, Six Paths City. Unlike when he had left, Mu Yue hadn't told the Shinobi sect when he would return, so there were no official greeters when he and his group came back. Word of their arrival spread fast, though, and a crowd of Shinobi sect ninja soon gathered at the sect's base. Sosuke-sensei, welcome back, they shouted, voices bright with relief. They all knew their leader was powerful, but facing the third Hokage, an unrivaled figure in the ninja world, had been a frightening prospect. Seeing Sosuke come back unscathed filled them with genuine joy. Gorgeously idolized though it might be, they could hardly help it. To many in the Shinobi sect, Sosuke was the six-path sage of a new era. As I said, I would be back very soon, Mu Yue said with a faint smile. Kakuzu listened, smiling without speaking. Who would have thought that Sosuke's bold claims about his strength were all true? Nothing said for morale or bravado. Sometimes the truth sounded stranger than lies. Nobody asked directly how the battle had gone. It was tacitly avoided. They were simply glad he had returned safely. Only after Mu Yue retired to his office did a few people edge up to the accompanying ninja, Nagato, Roshi, and the others, to pry for details. He won, one of them replied, short and matter-of-fact. If Sosuke had prevailed with great difficulty, the attendants might have glossed it over in deference to political sensitivities. But Sosuke hadn't just won, he had won decisively. The attendants saw no reason to hide it. What did Konoha's wounded pride have to do with them? If Konoha could raise a fight, they were welcome to try again. He won? Sosuke-sensei beat the third Hokage? Murmurs of disbelief ran through the ranks. They'd hoped he would return alive after a narrow loss. An easy, overwhelming victory was a delicious surprise. Not only did he win, Kakuzu explained, he won easily. Hiruzen Sarutobi wasn't a match. The reaction grew louder. Even Yahiko, usually composed, looked stunned. He hadn't been sure Konoha would simply stand aside. He'd expected them to throw everything at Sosuke. Had he misread Konoha's intentions? They didn't just sit and watch, Kakuzu said with a dismissive shake of his head. They tried to interfere, but they failed. If Sosuke had wanted, those Konoha shinobi would all be dead. You can disperse now, he added. Don't worry about Konoha anymore. With Sosuke here, the sky won't fall. After seeing what Sosuke could do, Kakuzu treated Konoha as a non-threat. If the founder of the Shinobi sect was that strong, even the 5 great Shinobi villages would have to hesitate before moving against them. The gathered ninja left in high spirits, eager to spread the news to comrades who hadn't been present. In a short time, everyone in Six Paths City, save for those on mission, knew that the Shinobi sect's leader had beaten the 3rd Hokage. That news reached Iwagakure's ears quickly. Inside a domed stone house in the city, a burly Iwagakure jonin frowned. "What's happening? Sosuke isn't dead. What is Konoha doing?" "Maybe the rumors are true," his companion said. "Maybe Sosuke really did beat Hiruzen." Their plans had hinged on Konoha's desire to eliminate Sosuke. If Sosuke fell, the Shinobi sect could become Iwagakure's covert pawn for decades. With Sosuke alive and defiant, that option shrank away. "Brother Huoguang, how credible is this?" the first man asked. Huoguang, who sat at the head of the table, thought for a moment. "Very likely true. The common people in Six Paths City are already talking about it. If this were a lie, it would only stoke tensions between the Shinobi sect and Konoha and might force Konoha to deploy troops. That's not the kind of thing Sosuke would do without cause. He must have won, and not by a little." Huoguang's face hardened. "This isn't good for us. We need to mobilize and verify the situation, then report back to the village." Iwagakure had previously courted the Shinobi sect because of Sosuke's personal strength. Now that same strength made him dangerous and uncontrollable. Onoki, who had offered rewards and cooperation, had been rebuffed. Economic ties were acceptable, but nothing more. Onoki had hoped to use Konoha's pressure to force the sect into Iwagakure's orbit. Sosuke's death at Konoha's hands would have been ideal, but with Sosuke alive and victorious, those plans had been thrown into disarray. The gathered jonin quickly compiled their findings and intelligence and sent it back to Iwagakure. Onoki read the dispatch with mounting seriousness. He checked and rechecked the report to make sure it wasn't a prank. Sosuke's strength, apparently enough to defeat Hiruzen, was no small matter. If only Hiruzen had died, Onoki murmured, more to himself than anyone else. A dead Hiruzen would have had its own uses for Iwagakure, but neither of them had fallen. Onoki's planned maneuver in the Land of Rain had collapsed into indecision. He could neither act openly against Konoha nor nudge events in his favor without revealing his hand. He considered the wider implications. Konoha had youth, talent, and resources. It would continue to prosper unless something dramatic intervened. The Shinobi sect, under Sosuke and backed by its geographic advantages, could now legitimately grow into a major power. If Sosuke's strength approached that of Senju Hashirama, the Rain might well host the 6th great ninja power. Onoki had no intention of watching the pie shrink without taking his share. "We must verify the battle's details," he decided. He could not yet accept the rise of another dominant force without action. Land of Fire, Konoha. The morning after the Jonin meeting, Kakashi finished his exercise and went to the shopping street for breakfast. He bought the latest issue of the Leaf newspaper. The headline read, "From chuunin teacher to fire shadow assistant." Kakashi smiled inwardly. The headline was clever. Juxtaposing 2 very different ranks would catch anyone's eye. A chuunin teacher was a respectable but modest post. A fire shadow assistant, however, was a position that influenced Konoha's direction, reserved for those who had proven both ability and achievement. He ate in the shop, reading as he went. The article began with Mu Yue's work at the Ninja Academy. He'd reorganized classes so multiple groups could study together, relieved teacher shortages, instituted holiday tutoring and internships, and dramatically improved the quality of graduating genin. The class he taught outperformed every other graduating class in Konoha's history. That was no luck. It was teaching skill. The paper moved on to the Third Shinobi World War and titled one section, "The Strongest Konoha Hero of the Third Shinobi World War." Given Mu Yue's record, the label wasn't far-fetched. On the Hidden Mist battlefield, he'd taken down Haku and several of the 7 ninja swordsmen. In a surprise mist attack, he'd slain a Jinchuriki and turned the tide. Against Iwagakure, he'd lured their spies into a trap and won a battle of 1,000 versus 2,000. In a later conflict, he'd used wood release to capture over 1,000 enemy ninja, helping secure final victory. Any one of those feats would have made a young shinobi famous. Kakashi finished his breakfast amid the hum of street talk. People were reading the same paper. No wonder Assistant Mu Yue rose so fast. He's done so much for Konoha, one passerby said. If he hadn't been there, who knows how the last few years would have gone, another replied. But rumors traveled too. I heard from a merchant that outside Konoha, they're saying our Hokage lost to some Sosuke of the Shinobi sect. Those small powers, how dare they spread that? Defeated the third Hokage? What nonsense. Next they'll claim he's the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths. Kakashi paused, listened for a few beats, then left the street and walked toward the south border forest. Kakashi was later than usual. He dawdled over breakfast and the morning paper. By the time he reached the south border forest, Rin and Obito were already training under Mu Yue's watchful eye. Mu Yue was teaching Obito the Flying Thunder God technique. Obito was practicing the spatial sensing steps when Kakashi approached. Obito looked up, confused. Hokage Uncle was defeated by Sosuke? Is that true? How did they even start fighting? Obito only knew there had been a breakdown in negotiations between Konoha and the Shinobi sect. He hadn't expected it to escalate as far as a clash with the Hokage. Kakashi, who had heard a rumor on the commercial street while reading the paper, decided to tell Mu Yue right away. He usually didn't disturb Mu Yue during lessons, but this sounded serious, either something Konoha needed to clarify quickly or else find ways to blunt the fallout. Kakashi explained what he had heard. Mu Yue listened, then nodded. It's true, he said calmly, but don't talk about it too much. Carry on as normal. The matter had already been raised at the highest levels. Konoha could keep secrets within its own walls, but it couldn't control the Shinobi sect or the rest of the world once an incident leaked. If the rumor was true, it explained something that had been puzzling Kakashi, why Hiruzen would abruptly hand over the Hokage's post. Hiruzen's official reason, that he was old and wanted younger blood, had felt odd. He wasn't that old, and there was no precedent for such a sudden abdication right after a major victory. If Hiruzen had been defeated by Sosuke, everything made more sense. Kakashi's gaze flicked to Mu Yue. If anyone in the world could change the 5 great shinobi nations' posture by force of presence, Mu Yue was near the top of that short list. He might not be Senju Hashirama, but in the current shinobi world, apart from Sosuke, whose depth was unknown, Mu Yue was undeniably one of the strongest. Mu Yue finished correcting Obito's stance. Sensing space is the first step of the Flying Thunder God, he reminded. Then he resumed the lesson. Kakashi put away his thoughts and went to work refining his swordsmanship and lightning-release chakra control. Meanwhile, in the Hokage building, one of Mu Yue's shadow clones was summoned by Anbu. Please come to the high-level conference room immediately, the Anbu said. The clone hurried off. At the meeting, Mu Yue reported plainly, as we expected, the Shinobi sect didn't keep the news confidential. Reports of my defeat by Sosuke, no, Hiruzen's defeat by Sosuke, have already reached the Land of Fire and even Konoha. Hiruzen wasted no time. It spread faster than we expected. Did the Shinobi sect promote it? He asked. Homura Mitokado frowned. News didn't typically travel that fast in their world. He was more worried about Sosuke's attitude than the rumor itself. Even if it leaks, it's mostly a loss of face for Hiruzen, he said. Konoha stands to lose little else. Mu Yue shook his head. It could also be other great ninja villages fanning the flames, he suggested. They had motive. Defeated villages wouldn't relish Konoha's prestige. Broadcasting that the Hokage had been bested would please them. Then what should we do? Utatane Koharu asked. Play it cool, Hiruzen decided. Ignore it and move on. If Konoha argued the point and Sosuke demanded another public fight, Konoha risked a humiliating spectacle either way. But accepting the defeat outright would harm the village's morale and momentum, so the temporary tactic was to act as if the rumor didn't exist. Hiruzen, however, had a real solution. Speed up the election, he ordered. Compress the procedures and get a result for the 4th Hokage as soon as possible. Appointing a new Hokage, preferably someone like Mu Yue, a promising second wood-release ninja, would blunt the damage more permanently. With that plan, Konoha made no show of explaining or suppressing the gossip. Instead, they pushed the election forward. The chuunin and genin votes came back astonishingly lopsided. Mu Yue received 90% of their votes. For every 10 rank-and-file ninja, 9 wanted Mu Yue as Hokage. When the numbers were tallied, someone realized the election was effectively over. The system weighted votes. Jonin votes counted for 40% of the total, while chuunin, genin, and the public each counted for 30%. Even though the Jonin were relatively few, their weight, combined with Mu Yue's overwhelming chuunin and genin support, put him well over the majority threshold. Even if Orochimaru received every public vote, he still couldn't catch Mu Yue. The high-level meeting amended the procedure. Public voting would continue, but the result would be declared immediately and presented to the Lord Daimyo and other high-ranking Land of Fire officials for formal confirmation. Word of Mu Yue's inevitable victory spread quickly. Uchiha Fugaku and Shisui seized the moment and called a clan elders meeting at Fugaku's study, too small a group to use Nanga Shrine. Fugaku spoke plainly. Konoha's wartime victory had brought a lot of lucrative high-level commissions. You want to assign the police force to take on those commissions? Uchiha Shengqing started to object out of habit, but the idea of the rewards made him pause. Uchiha Kekchu was more cautious. If our elite Uchiha leave the police force, who will keep public order? And what if we can't return? Fugaku answered, public order doesn't need overwhelming strength. Chuunin and genin can fill patrol duties for now. Keichu's concern shifted to status. If we don't suspend positions and they're only replaced temporarily by high-level missions, that's something I could support. Shisui clarified the proposal's origin. This isn't just us. It was Mu Yue's suggestion, he said. He thinks the police force's current strength is overkill for routine order-keeping. He proposed freeing that strength for higher-level work. Silence fell for a moment, then support rolled in. Assistant Mu Yue is right, Keichu smiled. Our Uchiha Jonin are strong. Wasting them on patrols seems wrong. I support it, others chimed. If Mu Yue became Hokage, almost a certainty now, the Uchiha wanted a leader who understood them. Mu Yue fit that bill perfectly, and Shisui silently thanked him. Mu Yue had taught Shisui much. Without him, Shisui doubted he'd have the same strength or insight. At the Jonin meeting, every Uchiha Jonin cast their vote for Mu Yue. Not a single abstention, not a single vote for Orochimaru. Once internal agreement was reached, Fugaku moved to concrete details. All right, since everyone agrees, let's discuss specifics. Meanwhile, Hiruzen had sent word to the Lord Daimyo of Fire Country. The Daimyo and his officials came under heavy escort for the Hokage election. It was a major political event, and as sponsor of the village, they hoped the new Hokage would be strong. In the council hall, the Daimyo leaned forward, fan raised close to his face. Third Hokage, he asked in a low voice. I heard you were defeated by that Sosuke. Is it true? Homura bristled. This meeting is for the Hokage election. Please save unrelated questions until after. Taken aback by the rebuke, the daimyo smiled and set the matter aside. Then do you have any recommended candidates? Hayate Mugetsu, Hiruzen answered immediately. Hayate Mugetsu, Minato Namikaze echoed. Hayate Mugetsu, Homura followed. Hayate Mugetsu, Utatane Koharu repeated. The name swept the room like a tide, the consensus already forming into a decision. 686, Mu Yue Hokage. As the announcement swept the room, every Konoha ninja present, except Mu Yue himself, voiced their support. Mu Yue, unlike Danzo Shimura, didn't nominate himself. He simply sat quietly and watched. The daimyo's gaze lingered on Mu Yue, who was seated beside Hiruzen Sarutobi. Mu Yue's name was well known. He had distinguished himself in several major battles, and the daimyo remembered him from the time he had been escorted to the Land of Rain to watch the youth martial arts tournament. Mu Yue is an excellent choice, a portly Fire Country official said. He contributed greatly to our victory in the Third Shinobi World War. Yes, and Mu Yue is a wood release user. He can wield the first Hokage's signature techniques, added another Fire Country official with a long beard. When electing a Hokage, the daimyo's council generally deferred to Konoha's recommendations. No one in the meeting objected. The daimyo closed his fan and clapped. Since Mu Yue has proven himself on the battlefield and inherits the first Hokage's ninjutsu, let Mu Yue serve as the fourth Hokage. With that, the election was decided. Mu Yue bowed politely. Thank you for your approval, daimyo. Applause broke out. Officials and Hiruzen Sarutobi alike applauded, celebrating the birth of the fourth Hokage. Hiruzen clapped too, though his expression was complicated. He wasn't hungry for power, but the thought that he would no longer stand by the Hokage office's tall window and look down on Konoha left him with a strange, wistful feeling. Konoha wasn't just a military force or his childhood home. It was the village he had steadied when everything fell apart. He had struggled to secure his position after Tobirama's death, relying on the help of colleagues like Danzo Shimura and Homura Mitokado. Later, as Hokage, he had marshaled forces, driven invading armies from the Land of Fire, and led counterattacks until the village stabilized and prospered. The gratitude of the villagers and the admiration of his ninjas had made the office of Hokage their ultimate aspiration. Hiruzen had ushered in a new era for Konoha, and the more arduous the struggle had been, the deeper his attachment. "Our era is ending," Homura Mitokado murmured. He had been thinking the same thing. When Mu Yue settled into office, he would surely gather a new core of trusted advisors, just as Hiruzen once had relied on Homura, Koharu, and Danzo. For those old-timers, the graceful option was to step aside and keep their dignity. Mu Yue was young, but no one's puppet. Homura wasn't ready to confront him directly. He had helped build Konoha, and he had also carved out some advantages for himself. He didn't want his last years ruined by scandal. Minato Namikaze, standing nearby, applauded with a bright smile. Inside, his feelings were conflicted. He had dreamed of being Hokage since he was a child, and seeing Mu Yue climb from chuunin instructor to the village's leader was bittersweet. On the battlefield and in technique, Mu Yue had surpassed him. He'd even mastered the Flying Thunder God technique Minato was known for, and their similarities in appearance and skill made Mu Yue feel like a brighter, more complete version of Minato. The gap was too wide to bridge, so Minato let go of the dream gracefully. He loved Konoha, not his own tenure as Hokage, so who held the office mattered less than the village's future. When the applause died down, the daimyo closed the meeting. He still had one question left in his mind about a rumor. "Third Hokage, is that report true?" "It's true," Hiruzen replied. The daimyo snapped his fan open in surprise. "That Sosuke is really strong," he said. He hadn't expected the Land of Rain to field a formidable ninja. Hiruzen smiled confidently. "No need to worry, I was the one who lost that day, but our fourth Hokage will not come up short against any ninja, not even the first." To many, being called second only to a ninja god was the highest compliment. To Hiruzen, though, Mu Yue's potential went beyond that. He believed Mu Yue combined the greatest traits of the first through third Hokage, the first's prodigious wood release, the second's advancements in ninjutsu, and Hiruzen's own breadth of technique. In Hiruzen's quiet estimation, Mu Yue might surpass even Senju Hashirama. The daimyo was startled. Hashirama's name was almost sacred in Konoha, but he smiled and replied, "I'll look forward to the good news." A stronger Konoha meant a stronger Land of Fire. "Congratulations, Mu Yue. It won't be long before I start calling you Lord Fourth," Minato said as he fell into step beside Mu Yue. Mu Yue waved him off. "No need for titles. Honestly, you'd make a better Hokage than I would." He meant it. If he could hand the office to Minato without political damage, he would. But imposing Minato as Hokage would only invite conspiracy and resentment. Mu Yue knew his own influence could crush people like Orochimaru, let alone Minato. Because of Mu Yue's presence, Minato's battlefield record looked less impressive than in other versions of events. His nomination might be criticized. Still, Minato shook his head. "You're underestimating yourself. I'm honored, but you're right for this job. So many people voted for you because they trust you." Hearing Minato's earnest lecture, Mu Yue could only nod. Civic duties awaited him, but he had other matters in his life as well. He silently thanked Tobirama. The shadow clone had proved invaluable, especially after he acquired the Yang seal. Clones weren't as effective a teacher as the original, but they were more than adequate to handle Konoha's political affairs. Half an hour later, Hiruzen announced the formal confirmation. Mu Yue would be the fourth Hokage, and the succession ceremony would take place in 1 week. The office of Hokage was Konoha's highest authority. Changing it wasn't something to rush. Hiruzen had already started the preparations. 1 week would be plenty, he thought, given how much groundwork had already been laid. News of Mu Yue's upcoming succession spread through the village like wildfire. As expected, Mu Yue will be Hokage. Even though Orochimaru is strong, I think Mu Yue will lead Konoha better. "Mu Yue?" Our beloved fourth. A group of villagers clustered in the street, arguing excitedly until an Uchiha officer on patrol approached them. The crowd went quiet. Uchiha police were not to be trifled with. "Sir, we heard Mu Yue is going to be Hokage," one villager stammered. "Mu Yue is going to be Hokage?" the Uchiha Jonin repeated, surprised. The new era for the Uchiha had arrived. He waved his subordinates away with a curt, "Keep your voices down and don't disturb others." The villagers relaxed. Some had been bracing for a punitive arrest under vague charges. Rumors about the Uchiha police force were plentiful and often unpleasant. Arbitrary detentions, harsh treatment of civilians, disdain for those outside the clan. Others pushed back, reminding each other not to generalize. There were good Uchiha who weren't policemen. In the Hyuga compound, Hyuga Hiyashi watched the news with a heavy heart. "It's a pity," he said. "Our shinobi have been ordinary for years. None have caught Mu Yue's eye." As a clan defined by a potent Kekkei Genkai and a legacy of Jonin, the Hyuga had always seen the Uchiha as rivals. Now, Mu Yue, soon to be Hokage, had taken 2 Uchiha disciples, but none from the Hyuga. Worse, Mu Yue's development of a sensory skill called Kenbun Shoku Haki made the Hyuga's long-range Byakugan less strategically indispensable than before. It might not make the Hyuga obsolete, but their influence would undoubtedly shrink. "I hope stronger heirs will be born to our clan," Hiyashi prayed inwardly. He didn't want the Hyuga to decline on his watch. Some connected to Mu Yue celebrated his succession quietly and eagerly. Others, without ties, felt uncertain about the future. Orochimaru only learned of Mu Yue's impending promotion that evening. He'd spent the day in the lab studying Hashirama cells. No one even knew where to look for him. When Mu Yue invited him out to eat, Orochimaru accepted and Afe read a thin smile. "Congratulations, Lord Mu Yue," he said. He had given up on the contest long ago. Sequestering himself in the lab was his quiet concession. Better to show goodwill now than fight losing battles. Tsunade had organized a celebratory feast that evening. "This succession was handled well," she said approvingly as everyone eyed the spread. She'd already planned. There would be the succession celebration, then one when Mu Yue officially took the office, and again for the 1-week anniversary. 1 week? That's not enough. It should be at least a year, Shizune retorted. Tsunade blinked and realized she'd spoken the thought aloud. "You heard wrong. I meant 1 year, she said, pinching Shizune's cheek. Obito, who'd been nearby, grinned and stepped forward. "I heard 1 week, he teased. Tsunade balled her fist. Obito blinked and backed up quickly. "On second thought," he amended, "maybe you did say 1 year. They laughed, old classmates who'd seen each other through many battles and mistakes. The air was warm, with the promise of change, and the village outside thrummed with the hope that Mu Yue's era would guide Konoha into a brighter future. 687. Joint Fight. News of Mu Yue's succession as Hokage spread fast, not only through Konoha and the Land of Fire, but outward to the neighboring countries. The 5 great shinobi villages kept eyes and ears across the world, so the other 4 great villages soon received reports from their intelligence operatives. Land of Earth, Iwagakure. Onoki read the dispatches and frowned. They finished the Hokage transition so quickly, no wonder Konoha has been quiet. So this was the plan. Word of Hiruzen Sarutobi's defeat by Sosuke had raced across the ninja world, and Iwagakure had played a part in gathering that intelligence. For Onoki, Konoha was a major problem, and the shinobi sect a smaller one. Ideally, the two would weaken each other. But events had not bent to his hopes. Konoha's measured silence, despite the scandalous gossip inside the village, was disturbing. "If this softens the blow, the price is high," Onoki murmured. The decision to put Mu Yue in as Hokage made sense for Konoha as an institution, but for Hiruzen it was a huge loss. Hiruzen had not only lost the office, he'd been made to look as if he'd resigned from responsibility. If Onoki had been in Hiruzen's place, he would likely have feigned death, given no answer, and refused to transfer power. Onoki skimmed the intelligence again, trying to squeeze more detail from the fragments available. The battle between Hiruzen and Sosuke was poorly documented. There had been few attendants, all elite warriors, and no spies embedded. Six Path City supplied only broken reports, and Konoha, probably because it was the defeated side, had clamped down on information. "Still too little to judge," he sighed. "Konoha likely won't provoke the shinobi sect openly. Is there someone else we can use? Onoki spread a map and traced the borders of the Land of Rain. To the north, the Land of Wind. To the east, the Land of Fire. To the west, the Land of Earth. The Land of Rain touched 6 countries in total, 3 large, 3 small. Bird Country and the Land of Rivers had no full ninja villages. Bird Country already hosted a Shinobi sect branch, which Onoki counted as within Sosuke's influence. The Shinobi sect was clearly ambitious. If Iwagakure had not monitored them, they might never have noticed that Sosuke had effectively absorbed Rain's ninja forces and brought them to their zenith. To casual observers, the Rain ninja village and the Shinobi sect appeared separate. Onoki knew otherwise. After Hanzo's death, Rain belonged to Sosuke, even if someone else fronted the village. Maintaining the facade of separate entities while consolidating power implied ulterior motives. Onoki suspected the Shinobi sect would soon set its sights on the Land of Rivers. The Land of Rivers, like Bird Country, had clans but no village, and its ninja strength exceeded Bird Country's. Onoki did not want the Shinobi sect to keep growing unchecked. When the sect had stirred trouble in Bird Country, Iwagakure had been tied up in war and unable to respond. Now the war was over. It was no longer acceptable to watch Sosuke expand. That made the Grass Country and the Land of Wind natural allies for Iwagakure. If the Shinobi sect became a 6th great power, it would not only take a slice from Iwagakure, Tsunagakure would be affected, and the Grass Village would feel encircled. Onoki wanted Tsunagakure to curb the Shinobi sect. On the other side, Rasa was thinking along similar lines. Land of Wind, Tsunagakure. Rasa read the same reports and slammed the table. If the Shinobi sect is so tough that Hiruzen had to resign, no wonder Konoha is reacting the way it is, he said. Rasa himself had been nearly killed by Mu Yue and bore a bitter grudge. If he had been able to finish the fight, he would have marched straight to Konoha's gates. When the news of Konoha's misfortune spread, Rasa had poured his agents into amplifying it, worried some might not yet know. Now he realized his propaganda had backfired. If I'd known, I wouldn't have let my intelligence ninjas help spread it. It's actually helped Hayate Mugetsu, Rasamem uttered, anger darkening his face. Mu Yue's rapid installation as Hokage made no sense without something dramatic happening to Hiruzen. That had opened the door for Mu Yue. The result was infuriating. After all the effort Rasa had invested to secure his own position as Kazekage, shoring up the country, quelling internal strife, Mu Yue had seemingly been carried into Hokagehood on a silver platter. Rasa could scarcely accept that. Konoha can't be provoked directly. We have to use Iwagakure, break any cooperation between them and the Shinobi sect. He forced himself to set aside personal resentment and think as a Kage. Retaliation against Mu Yue was out of reach. Preventing the Shinobi sect's rise was the priority. A single large village like Tsunagakure could easily crush a small nation's ninja forces, but Konoha's attitude made Rasa wary of acting alone. He needed Iwagakure on board to check the Shinobi sect, and he felt confident he could drive a wedge between Iwagakure and Sosuke. There were no eternal friendships among villages, only interests. Rasa thought of Yakura and summoned a trusted subordinate. Does Yakura have ties to the Shinobi sect? She does, I think. She twice took some ninjas to Six Path City for Sosuke's lectures. She even asked him about ninjutsu, the Jonin answered after a moment. Rasa's eyes brightened. Gather intelligence. Monitor Yakura closely. He resented Yakura personally. She had publicly rebuked him after the final battle, showing no gratitude for being saved. He had intervened on the battlefield and used magnet release to create a defensive double. He'd nearly been knocked back by one of Mu Yue's punches. Yakura's scorch release didn't provide that defense. Even though his intent in replacing her had not been to rescue her, she had lived and scolded him anyway. If he was going to act against the Shinobi sect, he might as well deal with Yakura too. She was unreliable and a potential liability. Land of Lightning, Hidden Cloud. The third Raikage studied the intelligence and felt his interest spike. How strong is this Sosuke? He actually forced Hiruzen Sarutobi that far, he said. He had not paid the Shinobi sect much mind before. The Land of Rain was distant, and the sect's numbers seemed small. The Cloud had stayed out of their youth martial arts tournament. Now the Raikage wondered if he had underestimated Sosuke. If I'm honest, in a one-on-one I'm not sure I'd beat Hiruzen, he grunted. let alone beat him until he won't be Hokage. Dodai, his subordinate, analyzed quietly. Since Sosuke appeared, he hasn't lost. Whether opponents were famed masters like Kakuzu or legendary warriors like Hanzo, none made him struggle. His true strength is an unknown. The rumor of Sosuke's victory elevated his renown. At first, many dismissed the reports as exaggeration. When Konoha stayed silent, however, attitudes shifted. Silence can be an answer, too. If the story were false, why would Konoha act indifferent over their Hokage's reputation? Six Paths' heritage, could he truly be the successor of the Six Paths Sages Shinobi sect? The third Raikage pondered. In many eyes, the Six Paths Sage was myth. But the Raikage knew better. Hidden Cloud had descendants of the sage, and they possessed the sage's tools. Those tools had power. Cloud history recorded a coup in which second Raikage was killed by Six Paths descendants wielding those tools. If remnants of the sage's tools could do that, what would a living Six Paths inheritance in Sosuke's hands mean? It was a terrifying thought. Still, doubts remained. If the Shinobi sect truly had an authentic successor, why had no one risen to restore it during 1,000 years of decline? Some believed Sosuke had simply created a new sect in the sage's name. The Raikage accepted that ancient and modern shinobi were different. Ancient shinobi sought world peace, while modern ones derived much of their livelihood from war. Land of Water, Hidden Mist. The third Mizukage sat in his office with the dossier in front of him. Yagura, what should Hidden Mist do now? He asked, smiling faintly as he listened. Do nothing. The former Yagura Karatachi replied uncertainly. You handled that defeat well, the Mizukage said. If the old Yagura had still been in full pride, he might have seized this moment to join others in attacking Konoha. During the Third Shinobi World War, they deeply offended Iwagakure, Sunagakure, and Kumogakure. Those villages might need Hidden Mist's strength now, but that didn't mean they would forgive past slights. Immediate coordination to crush Konoha would likely leave Hidden Mist worse off in the end. We can't openly assist Konoha either, the Mizukage continued. Konoha's momentum is too strong. It can be powerful, but not too powerful. Alliances among villages are fickle. Today you can sell out wind, earth, and lightning for advantage. Tomorrow Konoha could do the same to us if it suits them. If Konoha becomes strong enough to take on 4 opponents, would it still need Hidden Mist? No. Why share a pie when you can take it all? Yagura listened and nodded. He had accepted his own defeat by Mu Yue. The fourth Kazakage had nearly been killed by a single Mu Yue punch, so by comparison, Mu Yue seemed stronger. Are we not going to act against the Shinobi sect? Yagura asked. Sosuke alone has great value, doesn't he? Let's wait, the Mizukage replied. The Shinobi sect will soon face trouble. It might become the eye of the storm. Hiruzen's defeat had thrown Sosuke and his sect into the spotlight. That attention could be a blessing or a curse. The 5 great shinobi villages frequently fought among themselves, but if a force emerged that truly threatened their dominance, they might unite to crush it, just as they had done with the Rain Ninja village in the past. The structure of the ninja world had long been ruled by the 5 greats. None of those villages wanted a 6th power to upset that balance. 688. Succession, October 16th should have been an ordinary day in Konoha. After this year, it would be less ordinary. Some might remember it as the day the 4th Hokage took office. Don't push. You're almost shoving me into the Hokage building. Back up a little. Otherwise we won't be able to see Assistant Mu Yue. No, I mean Lord 4th. A crowd of shinobi and villagers had gathered around the Hokage building, waiting for the inauguration ceremony to finish. The ceremony itself was on the roof. Because of space and safety concerns, only a handful of jonin were allowed up there. Everyone else had to wait below until the outgoing Hokage handed over the Hokage hat, the symbol of the office, to the new Hokage. Then the new Hokage would step to the railing and offer a short speech to the people. The building was tall enough that, from the right distance, Mu Yue would be visible from the ground. But with so many people, the only good viewing spot was crowded. Fortunately, there were many shinobi among them, so there was no risk of a stampede. If anything went wrong, the nearby jonin would intervene. Up on the roof it was quiet. Only the distant murmur from below and the rustle of robes in the autumn breeze disturbed the stillness. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood in the center. Facing him, about 3 meters away, was Mu Yue. The two advisors, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado, were behind Hiruzen. The hidden mist envoy, Yagura Karatachi, there to observe, stood beside Homura. Behind them were Konoha's famous jonin, Orochimaru, Tsunade, Teacher Chen, and Minato Namikaze, and clan leaders and department heads like Nara Shikaku, Akimichi Choza, and Uchiha Fugaku. Kushina stood next to Minato. She might not be famous as Minato was, nor a clan leader, but as a Jinchuriki, she had a place in the front row. The next rows held veteran jonin such as Mimurabe Ketsu, then rising stars, Obito, Shisui, and Kakashi. Rin Nohara wouldn't normally have had a roof spot, but as Mu Yue's student she'd been allowed up, alongside Obito and the others. Otherwise, it would have been awkward for a jonin like Rin to have the same treatment as Yamato, who was still at the Ninja Academy. Hiruzen stared at Mu Yue. Mu Yue wore the specially made Hokage robe, only the hat remained to complete the office. The white robe suited him, though simple, it made him look fresh and radiant. Hiruzen felt a small pang of envy. His own inauguration years ago had been rushed and perfunctory. He couldn't change the past, but he could make sure Mu Yue's ceremony left no regrets. He took a deep breath, removed the Hokage hat, and held it steady in both hands. Thump, thump. Hiruzen walked slowly and solemnly toward Mu Yue, each step clear and deliberate. In the future, I want Teacher Mu Yue to pass the Hokage hat to me like that. Obito muttered, a surge of ambition swelling in him. From the day he'd entered the academy, his dream had never changed, to become Hokage. To be a Hokage who would end wars and give everyone in Konoha a better life. Obito had once hated studying so much that reading made him sleepy. Now he forced himself to read every day, convinced that knowledge was necessary for the dream. Shisui watched with his own thoughts. Mu Yue taking office would help resolve the Uchiha clan's tangled problems. With Mu Yue at the top of Konoha's power structure, and with his mentorship of both Shisui and Obito, the clan's external and internal troubles had reason to hope. When Hiruzen halted half a meter from Mu Yue, he looked directly into Mu Yue's eyes and handed over the hat. Mu Yue received it with both hands, lifted it with his right, and set it on his head. Neither man said a word. Clap, clap! Homura Mitokado and Utane Koharu began the applause, and the jonin behind them joined in. The sound swelled quickly into thunderous applause that lasted for about 20 seconds. I'm counting on you, fourth Hokage, Hiruzen said seriously. From that moment, Konoha's Hokage would no longer be Hiruzen Sarutobi, but Hayate Mugetsu. I will do my best, Mu Yue answered so, lemnly. Clap! Clap! Another wave of applause followed. The Hokage of Konoha, who wasn't even a squad commander a few years ago, Yagura Karatachi murmured, reflecting on how quickly things changed. He had once considered Mu Yue merely a troublesome opponent. Now Mu Yue stood leagues above him. Tsunade, meanwhile, pondered civic logistics. What groceries should I buy later? She wondered out loud. She didn't much care who became Hokage, but a celebration couldn't be half-hearted. Buy everything you want, someone replied. It's a Hokage inauguration. Better to be extravagant. Tsunade decided on an all-out feast. Only children make choices. Uchiha Fugaku allowed himself a small smile. He's finally taken office, fourth Hokage, he said to himself. With Obito and Shisui growing into their potential, the Uchiha might be entering their best era yet. Teacher Mu Yue will definitely be the best Hokage, Obito shouted, clapping enthusiastically. Mu Yue's many achievements made the claim feel natural to him. Several jonin glanced at Obito as if impressed by his boldness. Kakashi, standing to Obito's left, squinted as if the sun were unusually strong today. Rin, to Obito's right, looked like she wanted to speak but held back. Fourth Hokage, your burden will not be light. Everyone has high hopes, Hiruzen added with a wry smile, stroking his beard. He had no desire to be petty about such things. He genuinely believed in Mu Yue's potential and hoped he would surpass him. Mu Yue gave a faint smile, swept his gaze over the assembled shinobi, nodded, and walked to the railing to deliver his inaugural address. When those below saw Mu Yue in the Hokage hat, a roar went up at once. Lord Fourth Hokage, shouted the crowd, jonin, chuunin, genin, and villagers all together. When Mu Yue removed his hat and offered a warm smile, the cheering reached a high pitch. The afternoon sun caught his golden hair, making it gleam. His smile seemed to carry real warmth, and people felt it as they listened. Mu Yue raised his hand to quiet the crowd. His presence calmed them instantly. "I am Hayate Mugetsu," he said slowly, looking over the crowd. "From now on, I will serve as Konoha's fourth Hokage." Clap! Clap! The applause swelled once more. Ikeyu clapped loudly and couldn't help remembering when Mu Yue had first appeared at the academy. To him, Mu Yue's rise had seemed almost miraculous. In a little over 4 years, Mu Yue had gone from being a jonin instructor to vice principal of the academy, and now to Hokage, an ascent no ninja novel would dare dream up. Shimono Hisanobu, who had watched Mu Yue closely as head of the teacher's class, admitted he had underestimated him. The academy had been too small a stage for Mu Yue. His destiny lay with the whole of Konoha, perhaps even the entire Shinobi world. A former root operative and current training squad leader who'd once used Mu Yue as an example to inspire new recruits. Mu Yue is the finest root ninja, couldn't help but sigh. If Lord Danzo knew that his most prized root creation had become Hokage, he might have been comforted in the heavens. Yamato, who wasn't on the roof because he wasn't technically a shinobi, watched from below and smiled sincerely. "He's finally officially taken office," he murmured. "Asuma!" Someone called. Asuma, unable to attend the roof ceremony because he had only recently become a jonin, cheered loudly from below. He didn't mind. Most jonin weren't permitted up there. He preferred not to depend on Hokage privileges anyway. "Teacher Mu Yue," the students who'd learned under him shouted together. Whatever else he was now, to them he remained Teacher Mu Yue. Minato Namikaze looked at Mu Yue, backlit and radiant under the sun, and let out a sincere sigh. Like many who aspired to the Hokage role, Minato had dreamed of his own inauguration. Watching Mu Yue fulfill such a moment made him happy. Kushina, noticing a hint of envy in Minato's expression, reached out and squeezed his hand. "If he retires in 10 or 20 years, you'll still be in your 30s or 40s, she said. "There's still time." Minato let out a soft breath and smiled. He respected Mu Yue as Hokage. Unless Mu Yue stepped down voluntarily, Minato had no intention of forcing the issue the way Danzo might have. On the roof and below, the mood was one of unanimous celebration. Mu Yue returned everyone's support with a steady, warm smile. And somewhere in that scene, Obito's resolve brightened and his life's mission soared. Author's note removed. Perfect level Wuxiang sword. The notification flashed once more, but Mu Yue barely glanced at it and paid it no mind. Rewards could be claimed any time. They wouldn't vanish just because he didn't take them right now. His inauguration speech was short, 3 minutes at most. With applause and cheers from the crowd and the gathered ninja, the fourth Hokage succession ceremony was officially over. The civilians and the genin and chuunin dispersed, while the jonin followed the higher-ups to the large conference room for a meeting. Everywhere he passed, the ninja saluted him respectfully and called him fourth Hokage. At the conference room door, the Anbu opened the way. Mu Yue walked in first, Hiruzen Sarutobi a half-step behind, the others close behind them. Mu Yue took the main seat. Hiruzen sat to his right, and Homura Mitokado to his left. The jonin had been informed in advance and soon filled the room. Effective immediately, Minato Namikaze will serve as Fire Shadow assistant. Mu Yue dropped the announcement like a bomb as soon as the meeting began. Surprise rippled through the jonin. Everyone knew a Fire Shadow assistant post would open after the new Hokage took office, but few expected Mu Yue to choose Minato. Most had assumed Hiruzen would hold it alongside the new Hokage, or that some veteran on the level of Orochimaru or Tsunade would fill the role. Minato had only recently become a jonin squad leader and had no particularly extraordinary merits. This promotion was unexpected. The jonin glanced toward the senior officials. Hiruzen's face was unreadable. He'd presumably approved the appointment in the pre-inauguration meeting. Utatane Koharu showed no reaction either, though she was inwardly displeased. She understood Mu Yue's desire to foster his own team, but promoting a Fire Shadow assistant immediately on taking office struck her as disrespectful to the old guard, especially since the high-level meeting had taken place before Mu Yue's official investiture. With both the old and new Hokage's nods, her objections were moot. The room erupted into applause. Even those privately opposed joined in. No one wanted to oppose or insult the new Hokage. They would simply watch Minato closely, and if he failed, take action later. Kushina clapped the loudest, thrilled for Minato. She didn't know the exact hierarchy, only that Mu Yue had once been promoted from Fire Shadow Assistant to Hokage, so the post seemed significant. Obito clapped just as hard, feeling a twinge of regret for Minato. Under normal circumstances, Minato might have been the one to inherit the Hokage mantle himself. When the applause died down, Minato stood, bowed, and vowed, "I will diligently fulfill my duties, even if it means giving my life." Thunderous applause followed. Minato sat, eyes grateful as he looked at Mu Yue. He hadn't expected such a rapid promotion. Mu Yue had clearly pushed for it. Mu Yue's trust would not be betrayed. Minato silently promised himself that he would produce results and silence any whispers of nepotism. Next, Nara Shikaku will serve as Jonin's squad leader, Mu Yue announced. The appointment drew no surprise. Shikaku, head of the Nara clan, was capable and deserving. The meeting wrapped up in about an hour. Mu Yue's main objective had been Minato's promotion. Everything else was secondary. The Jonin returned to their duties, some to posts, some to training, and those with new roles began handovers. Alone later in the Hokage office, Mu Yue opened his panel to claim Obito's settlement rewards. Disciple Uchiha Obito, strength increased, reputation up, connections gained, probability of becoming Hokage moderately increased. Progress reward, chakra plus 3000, random skill extraction scroll fragment, S+, mastery level, time 2, fire release chakra comprehension boost. Disciple Uchiha Obito, strength increased, reputation up, connections gained, probability of becoming Hokage greatly increased. Progress reward, chakra plus 4000, limited random ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu skill perfect scroll. Fire release chakra comprehension boost. Obito's mission progress had surpassed 70%, so 2 settlement rewards triggered at once. Rewards after 50% were significantly better, especially the chakra amounts. At 50%, the chakra was only plus 2000. At 70%, it jumped higher. Compared to Mu Yue's own million-level chakra, though, even plus 4000 felt like a mosquito bite. The fragments weren't as precise as the self-selecting options, but an S+ extraction scroll would still likely yield something useful. Mu Yue's attention fixed on the limited random ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu skill perfect scroll. Perfect level skills were extraordinarily rare. All of Mu Yue's existing perfect level skills had come from teaching rewards, which were hard to get and usually guaranteed only when trust level 4 was reached. The scroll could randomly upgrade 5 selected skills to perfect level. If it drew from his whole library, it would be underwhelming, so Mu Yue carefully chose 5. Blue Flame, Flying Thunder God Technique, One Thought Cut, Limitless, and Yang Release Breathing. Blue Flame, One Thought Cut, and Limitless had come from S+ scrolls and were already powerful. Yang Release Breathing tied into his Sun Breathing development plan, and if forced to improve, could accelerate that path. Flying Thunder God was a practical pick among the remainder. He couldn't choose chakra nature transformation skills here, otherwise he would have put in Yin and Yang Release Nature Transformation, which were exceptionally hard to enhance. A large spinning wheel appeared on the panel, each skill occupying 20%. The pointer spun fast, slowed after 10 seconds, and seemed to settle into the limitless area, then wobbled and jumped into the next segment. Limited random ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu skill perfect scroll consumed. Obtained skill, One Thought Cut, perfect level. A surge of cultivation experience for One Thought Cut flooded Mu Yue's mind. Sword arts, advanced lightning release chakra transformations, so much material that his head spun for a moment. Perfect level truly was different. He opened his panel to examine the change. Name, Hayat 3800. Skills, lightning release chakra transformation, perfect level 3100, 80,000. Fire release chakra nature transformation, perfect level 2600. Sword mastery, master of various schools of sword and blade arts. Upgrading One Thought Cut had pushed lightning release chakra nature transformation to the top among his natures. Mu Yue felt that if he unleashed One Thought Cut now, perfect level lightning breathing plus perfect level lightning release plus perfect level One Thought Cut, the result would be terrifying. Only Sage Mode or vastly more chakra could raise his maximum output further. He closed that panel and pulled up Obito's life mission. Name, Uchiha Obito. Life mission. It is not the person who becomes Hokage that is recognized by everyone, but the person who is recognized by everyone that can become Hokage. Main goal, become the Hokage of Konoha Ninja Village. Mission progress, 70.9%. Mu Yue judged that most of the remaining progress now depended on Obito himself. External influence had likely reached its limit short of outright coercion, something Mu Yue didn't intend to do, and perhaps Obito would resist anyway. If Obito kept improving his own qualities, his chance was still strong. He checked Shisui next. Shisui had triggered a 50% settlement reward. Name, Mission, Uchiha and Konoha. Main goal, eliminate the conflict between the Uchiha and Konoha and integrate the Uchiha into Konoha. Mission progress, 55.8%. Disciple Uchiha Shisui's strength increase promoted police reform, taking a small step toward eliminating the Uchiha-Konoha conflict. Progress reward, Chakra plus 2000, optional draw scroll fragment. S+, mastery level, Yin release chakra insight improvement. Shisui was currently the second most advanced disciple on life missions. Obito had simply been further ahead and had triggered the bigger settlement, and first. Mu Yue suspected Obito wouldn't keep his lead forever. Shisui, with help from his Hokage teacher, could probably push past 80% within a year, even if the Uchiha issue couldn't be fully solved immediately. A knock sounded on the Hokage office door. "Come in," Mu Yue called. Minato Namikaze opened the door and stepped in, a little stunned to see Mu Yue occupying the Hokage's chair. Since joining the ninja world, every time he had opened that door, it had been Hiruzen inside. The change felt odd. "Fourth Hokage," Minato greeted. As Fire Shadow assistant and now one of the higher-ups, he no longer felt the need for overly formal titles. "When it's just the two of us, don't be so formal. Call me Mu Yue, like before," Mu Yue said with a smile. If circumstances had been different, he would have liked to give Minato the Hokage seat himself, so small formalities mattered little. Minato relaxed and smiled back. Mu Yue handed him a document. "Minato, look this over first." Minato had been summoned not to report, but because Mu Yue had asked him to come after the meeting, he read carefully. 10 minutes later, his face showed surprise and puzzlement. "Mu Yue, is this the reform you're planning for the ninja school?" Mu Yue nodded. "Yes, though not entirely. I'm not establishing a university yet, just adding a middle school." Minato breathed easier. The university in the original plan had seemed unrealistic. The ninja school graduated at most 300 students per year. With such small numbers and many specializations, staffing a university with jonin instructors would create enormous annual costs. The current school ran a 6-year system in peacetime. Mu Yue proposed a 4-year primary plus a 3-year middle school, 7 years total. Change the current ninja school to a 4-year primary that compresses and refines the original 6 years material, then add a 3-year middle school, Mu Yue explained. Graduates of middle school will all have mastered a C-rank ninjutsu and develop, so they'll be noticeably stronger than current graduates. Minato agreed that the plan would produce superior genin. Your 4-year primary isn't just a reclassification, it intensifies the training, and the middle school guaranteeing a C-rank technique is impressive. Still, a university right now isn't realistic. He pointed to the main obstacle, teachers. If we subdivide into fire release specialization, water release specialization, medical, sealing, and so on, we'll need far more instructors. Many courses that would be taught at a university level require jonin. Jonin are our core combat force. If they stop doing missions to teach a handful of students, mission revenue falls. That reduces our resources and hurts mission efficiency. We can't weaken the village to try to cultivate a better next generation. That's putting the cart before the horse. 10 years total, primary, middle, and 3 years of university, is simply too long for Konoha to support. Money and manpower were the constraints. Mu Yue had already considered this. That was why he'd limited the reform to adding a middle school for now. A 10-year training track was too long for the ninja world's current economy. Graduates of middle school would be official ninja eligible for missions. Balancing university studies with mission duties posed another problem. They talked for 2 hours. Minato, being local, offered perspectives Mu Yue hadn't fully anticipated, differences that weren't right or wrong, just useful. Minato admired the thoroughness of Mu Yue's plan and could see the long-term value, even while pointing out practical limits. "Mu Yue, Why did you think of a university at all? Minato asked as he rose to leave. He genuinely thought the current system sufficed. Students graduated and were then mentored by chuunin or jonin while also taking missions. Mu Yue only smiled and didn't answer. Should he confess that he worried about otherworldly threats and wanted to gather the ninja world's geniuses together faster? He let the question hang unanswered as Nato left. 690. The Tsuchikage personally takes the field. Land of Rain, Six Paths City. A squad of shinobi wearing hidden sand headbands entered the city. Their arrival barely registered with the shinobi sect or the townspeople. Since the news that Sosuke had defeated Hiruzen Sarutobi spread, Six Paths City had become livelier than ever. People came to buy property, betting that the shinobi sect could withstand pressure from Konoha. If the shinobi sect held, Six Paths City would be not only the safest place in the Land of Rain, but perhaps one of the safest places in the ninja world. And real estate prices would soar. Others, however, sold their homes, doubting that a small organization like the shinobi sect could survive the combined might of the 5 great shinobi villages. Even with a powerful leader, a protracted war would eventually favor Konoha. The people of the Land of Rain had seen this cycle before. Aside from speculators, many shinobi and curious onlookers came to see Sosuke, the man who had defeated the 3rd Hokage. Intelligence operatives from other villages were also present. This city is booming. How long has it been here? Is it 3 years? Incredible, one sand ninja muttered. To him, Six Paths City seemed even more vibrant than the hidden sand village, despite being the creation of a newly risen force. Lively? That's not good, Yakushimaru said, shaking his head. With the 5 great shinobi villages at an uneasy ceasefire, Six Paths City, having already crossed swords with Konoha, was the whirlpool of the ninja world. The shinobi sect's sudden rise made them a target. Not only Konoha, but neighboring powers probably didn't want the sect to prosper. Let's move. We don't have much time, Yakushimaru ordered. They hadn't come to window shop. Their mission was to sever relations between the shinobi sect and Iwagakure and to draw Iwagakure into alliance with Tsunagakure. The sand team split into 2. Yakushimaru's team would openly seek out Iwakure's representative in Six Paths City to warn them about the danger posed by the shinobi sect and to offer cooperation. That would be the overt move. The disguised team had the covert task to frame the shinobi sect and create incidents that would strain Iwagakure's trust. Timing was everything. If the sand operatives were rebuffed one day, and then the shinobi sect suffered an incident the next, Iwagakure would suspect sand involvement. The public contact with Iwagakure and the covert provocations had to be coordinated so they appeared independent. To minimize exposure, the 2 sand teams had no contact that day. They acted on a prearranged schedule. Only if one team could not complete its mission would they notify the other. Yakushimaru and his men began searching for Iwagakure operatives. They weren't the only sand team in the city. Another reconstruction team had entered in disguise. Yakushimaru's group moved at a brisk pace. Huh, puppet jutsu here? A sand puppet master murmured, staring at a shinobi sect ninja's arm. At a glance, it looked like a real limb, but to someone who dealt in puppets every day, the artificial nature showed. Modifying the human body wasn't a simple trick. The sand puppet master was surprised. The shinobi sect's prosthetic resembled puppet technology. The shinobi sect ninja, catching him looking, had meant to boast about their surgical work. Only Sasori could do that sort of procedure, and it was rare and costly. But on seeing the sand headband, he wisely kept quiet. The sand village was the powerhouse of puppet jutsu. Exhibiting such technology risked revealing trade secrets. They suppressed their curiosity and focused on the mission. Yakushimaru's team quickly found Iwagakure's representative in Six Paths City. At the appointed moment, Yakushimaru revealed his credentials, claiming to be the 4th Kazakage's brother-in-law, and smoothly arranged a meeting with Iwagakure Jonin Huoguang. After taking control of the Land of Rain, the shinobi sect immediately moved against Bird Country. Clearly, after something big, Yakushimaru opened, casting car. He shinobi sect as ambitious and dangerous. But Huoguang didn't react with outrage. He didn't scold Yakushimaru for meddling in Iwagakure's alliances. Instead, he listened with a small, surprised smile. Yakushimaru hesitated, glanced around, and pressed on. When he finished, Huoguang replied politely, "You're not wrong. I noticed the same thing. I didn't expect others would see the shinobi sect's ambitions as well." Yakushimaru blinked. He'd come to drive a wedge between the shinobi sect and Iwagakure, but the two already weren't as close as he'd assumed. This was supposed to be the first step in a longer plan. How could it be finished so easily? Lord Yakushimaru. Just then, a sand shinobi who had been waiting outside hurried over. "Pardon me." Yakushimaru excused himself and went to meet him. "Bad news," the man whispered. The other team was captured by the shinobi sect. The framing operation failed. Yakushimaru's expression tightened, but he kept his composure. "Don't be flustered. Looks like Iwagakure isn't inclined to let the shinobi sect grow any stronger," he said, attempting to reassure his man. Even if the covert team had been caught, securing Iwagakure's cooperation would still count as mission success. Back at the meeting, Yakushimaru and Huoguang criticized the shinobi sect's ambitions and fretted over the threat to the newly fragile peace. Whenever Yakushimaru proposed concrete cooperation, Huoguang softened his stance, vague and non-committal. In the end, he would only say he needed to consult the Tsuchikage. Yakushimaru was not surprised. He'd expected caution. He had already done most of what he came to do, express Sunagakure's worries and plant the seed of cooperation. Huoguang escorted him back and promptly reported to Iwagakure headquarters, forwarding the sand intelligence. Huoguang did well, Onoki said with a small smile as he read the reports. Iwagakure had long considered an alliance with Sunagakure, but when the approached party holds the advantage, the solicited side naturally plays hard to get. Huoguang's tactic, voicing displeasure with the shinobi sect while remaining non-committal, was excellent. "There shouldn't be trouble with Sunagakure," Onoki murmured, "but getting the grass village on board might be tricky." During the Third Great Ninja War, Iwagakure had secretly allied with the leader of the grass village. The grass folks aided Iwagakure covertly until Konoha intervened. The former grass leader went mad and was killed, and grass turned on Iwagakure, later siding with Konoha. With Iwagakure's strength, controlling Grass Village directly wouldn't be hard, but power politics mattered. Grass was now somewhat of a junior to Konoha. They couldn't be treated roughly. For Iwagakure, dragging Grass into the conflict would only yield expendable chuunin and chuunin, a minor benefit. What Onoki really wanted was to probe Konoha's stance, and to learn the truth behind Hiruzen Sarutobi's defeat and why he had allowed Mu Yue to succeed him as Hokage. A thought struck him. Since Iwagakure would likely oppose the shinobi sect, why not use existing goodwill to gather information now? Instead of trying to pry battle accounts out of the shinobi sect or Konoha, he could send someone, perhaps himself, to the shinobi sect and request a friendly spar under the pretense of witnessing their leader's strength. Given the current relations, could Sosuke refuse? The sect was allied to Iwagakure. If Iwagakure later wanted to keep the outcome quiet, it would be easy. They could gain intelligence without making a public fuss like Hiruzen had. Onoki decided it was best he go himself. Hiruzen had fallen to Sosuke. That made the results of any encounter uncertain to outsiders. Onoki was confident his own skill wouldn't be inferior to Hiruzen's. Any insight Hiruzen could gain in battle, Onoki believed he could obtain as well. He convened a high-level meeting and proposed the plan. After discussion, most senior officials approved. Iwagakure was preparing to stand against the shinobi sect, but they had not yet done so. Penley, a friendly spar with an ally carried little obvious risk. At most, they'd bring additional guards. If Hiruzen could return to Konoha after his clash with the shinobi sect, then their third Tsuchikage should not hesitate to visit as well. After the high-level meeting gave its approval, Onoki secretly led a small group of veteran Iwagakure jonin to Six Path City, without even notifying Huoguang, Iwagakure's representative there. In Onoki's view, this should not be public knowledge. The fewer who knew, the better. The reason was simple. He thought he might lose. Onoki did not consider himself weaker than Hiruzen Sarutobi, but he also did not think he was stronger. If Sosuke could defeat Hiruzen, he very well might defeat Onoki. Given the likelihood of losing, it made sense to keep the matter quiet. Akage's defeat was hardly something to broadcast, and Onoki had no intention of surrendering his title now. No one in Iwagakure satisfied him enough to be a successor. Until they reached Six Path City, Onoki and the Jonin with him kept up transformation technique disguises. Once inside the city, Onoki didn't seek Sosuke immediately. He walked around, observing. Although he had followed the Shinobi sect's affairs from afar, this was his first time in Six Path City. As Tsuchikage, he could not leave the village lightly. He remained mindful of duty even here, gauging the mood in the city and watching the Shinobi sect's ninja at work. These Shinobi sect ninja aren't panicking at all, he noted, eyeing them. He wasn't sightseeing so much as gathering intelligence, feeling out the atmosphere, and assessing the quality of the Shinobi sect forces. Kitsuchi, let's go find Sosuke, Onoki said to the Jonin at his side. To keep things secret, he had brought only absolutely trusted men, seasoned Iwagakure Aimbu or Jonin he knew well. Kitsuchi nodded, took a few of them to a secluded spot to undo their transformation techniques, and then went to the Shinobi sect's office building to request an audience with Sosuke. Onoki would not negotiate in person. Kitsuchi would state Iwagakure's intent. If Sosuke agreed, they would pick a discreet spot outside the city for a friendly sparring match. If not, they would leave as if nothing had happened. Kitsuchi often represented Iwagakure in dealings with the Shinobi sect, so the sect's ninja were familiar with him. He met Sosuke and presented the request smoothly. You want a friendly match with me? Mu Yue's shadow clone frowned in thought. He understood that friendly was a pretense. The real goal was intelligence gathering. Some of Iwagakure's minor actions outside the Land of Rain might slip past the Shinobi sect, but Mu Yue was both the Shinobi sect's leader and the Hokage of Konoha. He suspected Iwagakure was wary and preparing to act, and they wanted to burn some goodwill first. All right, let's meet outside the city at 3 p.m., the clone agreed. In the past, Mu Yue's clone would neither be able to agree nor fight the same day, but things had changed. Limitless travel far outstripped the Flying Thunder God technique for long-distance movement. Mu Yue could cross countries quickly now. If Onoki wanted information, Mu Yue would give him truths. If Onoki was cowed and settled down, that would be one more measure of peace in the ninja world. If Onoki instead sought to eliminate Mu Yue's alias entirely, Mu Yue hoped that the clash would prompt him to gather allies, perhaps solving multiple problems at once. Thank you, Kitsuchi said. No trouble, Mu Yue replied with a chuckle. Iwagakure helped a lot when Six Path City was first established. Kitsuchi felt a flush of shame. Iwagakure had been quietly plotting against the Shinobi sect, yet the sect still remembered their past kindness. Still, Kitsuchi remained loyal to Iwagakure. Shame or not, he would not betray his village's plans to Sosuke. Morally, it might look questionable, but from Iwagakure's perspective and from the Land of Earths, they were not in the wrong. They had agreed on 3 p.m., but Onoki arrived 10 minutes early. Mu Yue happened to arrive at the same time, accompanied by Nagato, Yahiko, and a few other Shinobi sect ninja. Because Onoki wanted secrecy, Mu Yue had brought only a few people and expressly ordered them not to reveal anything beforehand. As befits the legendary ninja master, there's a scholarly air about you just standing there. It's better to see you in person than to hear about you, Onoki said with a chuckle. Since Iwagakure had initiated this match, he wanted to be courteous. Hostility could come later. For now, they had to play the part of ally. Roshi stood behind Mu Yue, jaw slack at how kindly Onoki looked. Could someone so amicable really be the old fox he expected? Roshi had never seen that expression on Onoki before. In front of a senior like you, how can I be called legendary? When the name of the two scales echoed through the ninja world, I was still an unknown, Mu Yue replied with polite flattery. He knew Onoki had ill intentions, but he didn't mind. Onoki would get his comeuppance soon enough. Haha, no wonder those who attended the ninja master's lectures found them memorable, Onoki said. You're so eloquent, I'd even like to hear one of your lectures. It was true. Mu Yue's words were plain but persuasive, and Onoki found them agreeable coming from him. Onoki noticed one Shinobi sect ninja giving him a strange look but ignored it. If he recalled correctly, the man was Bai Chuan, who oversaw the sect's branch in Bird Country. He had some status but hadn't shown great strength. Onoki tended not to take most middle-tier Shinobi sect members seriously. He believed many rode on Sosuke's coattails and were weaker than mid to high-level ninja from small villages like Kusagakure. Next time there's a lecture event, I'll invite you, on behalf of the Shinobi sect, Mu Yue said. Next time. Since the sect had only staged 2 lecture events so far at long intervals, if Onoki's plan went smoothly, there might be no future lectures. With the polite exchanges concluded, both sides began to prepare. Kitsuchi, fall back. Be careful not to get caught in the fighting range, Onoki warned, eyes fixed on Sosuke. If he used dust release at full power, its destructive radius would be enormous. Kitsuchi and the other Iwakure Jonin knew the terror of dust release and quickly pulled back. Father, go for it. Kitsuchi inhaled, quietly condensing chakra and focusing on the battlefield, ready to use ninjutsu to defend Onoki if needed. He had actually volunteered to test Sosuke himself, but Onoki had refused, saying Kitsuchi wasn't strong enough. Kitsuchi was a significant force, but not on the level of someone who could beat Hiruzen Sarutobi. The rest of the Iwagakure Jonin stood alert too. Despite the current friendliness, accidents could happen in battle. If they had to, they would support Onoki, but secretly they'd rather support Sosuke. That would mean their leader was winning. On the other side, Nagato and the others also moved back. Mu Yue had brought only 4 people. Nagato and Roshi had seen Mu Yue's fight with Hiruzen and knew his terrifying strength. Yahiko and Konan had heard the accounts and dared not be careless. Roshi looked at Onoki with a gleeful half-smile. You've really kicked a chakra steel plate this time, challenging Sosuke, Roshi said, schadenfreude plain on his face. He didn't entirely hate Onoki, but he resented him enough that the sight of him being humbled would please Roshi greatly. If not for secrecy, Roshi would have wanted to photograph the defeat. Having watched Hiruzen crushed by Sosuke, Roshi could already imagine how badly Onoki might lose. Yahiko's gaze flicked between the 2 figures, curiosity evident. Konan folded her hands over her chest, silently hoping Sosuke would win and remain unscathed. She had heard that the Tsuchikage's bloodline limit, dust release, surpassed many others in destructive power. Nagato watched calmly. He was the one in the Shinobi sect who understood Mu Yue's strength best, and he knew Onoki had no chance. In truth, Nagato felt that under Mu Yue's guidance, he might even be capable of defeating Onoki himself. His yang-release breathing had improved greatly, and Mu Yue had said that with continued training, he might master yang-release breathing chakra mode. On top of that, Nagato was growing more proficient with the Rinnegan and could now use all of its basic abilities. They stared at each other for half a minute, then nodded once and moved as one. Whoosh! Onoki's feet burst with chakra and his whole body leapt upward. Earth Release, super lightweight rock technique. He converted his chakra into Earth Release and greatly lightened his own weight, floating in the air. Seeing Onoki take flight, Sosuke halted on the ground and watched him silently. Earth Release, Earth Rising Spikes. As Onoki flew, he shaped hand signs. Boom! Countless rocky spikes tore up from the earth beneath Sosuke's feet, turning the ground around him into a forest of jagged pillars meant to pierce him through. But under the effect of Limitless, every spike stopped 3 centimeters short of Sosuke. Though it looked like he was surrounded, not a single spike touched his robe. Bang! Sosuke waved casually, and the spikes shattered like brittle paper. Onoki's eyes narrowed. This wasn't as simple as he'd hoped. He hadn't expected earth-rising spikes to be a one-hit kill against Sosuke, but the reaction was abnormal. Earth Release, Golem Technique. He climbed higher and formed more hand signs, concentrating Earth Release chakra in his throat and spitting out huge blocks of stone. Rumble, the blocks combined into a rock giant over 10 meters tall in an instant. Fire Release, Fire Dragon Dance. Sosuke inhaled, converted a flood of chakra into Fire Release, clasped his hands, and exhaled a vast sea of flame. Whoosh! The inferno raced outward, scorching earth and raising the temperature so high that watching shinobi like Kitsuchi and Yahiko began to sweat. The rock giant at the center of the blaze turned into a burning, hulking mass. Before Onoki could force it to smother the flames, the giant lost cohesion, exploded, and sent hot, shattered stone flying. As expected of the strongest fire release, Kitsuchi muttered as he dodged fragments. Even the Golem technique, one of the sturdiest earth release defenses, couldn't withstand this fire release. Anyone trying to block Sosuke's flame with ordinary earth defenses would be courting death. Onoki frowned. His plan had been to probe how Sosuke countered the earth-rising spikes, and he'd purposely used the golem technique to test things offensively and defensively. Now that the golem was blown apart, he had to change tactics. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world. Without hesitation, Onoki brought his hands together and condensed a huge amount of chakra, shifting it to dust release. He wasn't trying to kill. He wanted information, not a duel to the end. His flying speed increased as he closed in on Sosuke, who moved forward as well. When they were 10 meters apart, Onoki fired the dust release, a brilliant white cylindrical beam hurtling toward Sosuke. "You won't dodge?" Onoki wondered. Dust release wasn't obscure. The ninja world remembered the terror of that Kekkei Genkai since the second Hokage. Given Sosuke's knowledge, he must know how devastating it was. The cylinder struck Sosuke. Boom, a deafening explosion and blinding white light filled the air. Rumble, ground and rocks were pulverized into sand. A curtain of dust rose and hid the battlefield. Every Iwagakure shinobi watched the blast's center with grim eyes, praying that when the dust cleared, there would be nothing left of Sosuke. If dust release couldn't be landed reliably, that explained why Onoki was only one of the world's pinnacles and not its undisputed strongest. A wind blew through the smoke, the dust thinned, and Sosuke stood unharmed. How is this possible? Onoki's pupils widened. He suspected a genjutsu and tried to steady his chakra. "Genjutsu, release," he called, attempting to dispel any illusion. Still nothing changed. Sosuke's white robe was intact. There wasn't even a singe. Even Kitsuchi, who had once tried to learn dust release from Onoki and had a deep understanding of it despite failing to master the Kekkei Genkai, felt his disbelief swell. This was dust release, a technique beyond ordinary ninjutsu. For it to fail so utterly against Sosuke was staggering. The shinobi sect members were calmer. They expected as much. Roshi grinned at Onoki's stunned face. If not for wanting to keep the shinobi sect's advantage, he would have dispelled his transformation technique just to savor the moment. Nagato, meanwhile, wasn't surprised. In his view, Sosuke's defensive art was even more formidable than the Rinnegan's Prita path. While Prita could absorb jutsu, Limitless could stop taijutsu as well. Onoki forced himself to breathe and gather chakra for another detachment of the primitive world, but Sosuke gave him no time. The white-clad man rose swiftly. He had also mastered the super lightweight rock technique. Before Onoki could consider it, Sosuke charged. Onoki abandoned the dust release and poured earth chakra into his right arm, encasing it in rock. He swung with everything he had. Bang! The stone arm met Sosuke's ordinary limb, and a force like an earthquake struck. The rock armor cracked like a spiderweb and exploded. Onoki flew back and crashed to the ground, his right arm bleeding. "What terrifying strength," Onoki breathed. The world knew Kitsuchi as the master of the Iwa fist, but the skill itself had come from Onoki. Age had simply kept Onoki from using it often. To have his arm shattered and badly wounded by Sosuke's raw power shocked him. He threw a few rock clones into the fray to bind Sosuke and prepared another dust release. But Sosuke dismantled the clones with a display of speed and precision that made Onoki hesitate. The first clone punched and missed by millimeters. Sosuke turned his torso, tapped the clone's wrist, and it crumbled. The second swung from behind, but Sosuke pivoted with a waist twist and elbowed its vital point. Again, it shattered. The third tried to release an earth jutsu at mid-range, but Sosuke vanished from its line of attack, and the last clone broke apart. Onoki had a premonition. Even if detachment of the primitive world hit, it might not kill Sosuke. After all, Sosuke had just withstood a direct dust release. Still, he couldn't hold back. He launched the huge white cube. Sosuke didn't dodge. He raised his head slightly to look at Onoki and simply stood still as the cube closed in. Onoki's face grew grave. There were only two explanations. Sosuke didn't know the full destructive power of dust release, or he had absolute confidence in his defense. The cube engulfed Sosuke and everything around him. In seconds, trees and rock were erased like pencil marks being rubbed out. A neat pit remained where the forest had been, except for the figure in white standing calmly at the bottom, watching Onoki, whose arm still bled. "My dust release," Onoki whispered. Even now, seeing Sosuke's robe untouched, he couldn't calm down. This was his strongest technique, strong enough that even Uchiha Madara wouldn't take it head-on. Exhausted from the chakra and with blood surging in his chest, Onoki couldn't maintain the lightweight rock technique and began to fall. "Lord Tsuchikage!" Kitsuchi rushed in without thought to catch his father. Other Iwagakure Jonin followed and shielded them, and Sosuke made no move to stop them. He tacitly allowed it. 693. Conflicts at the top. Onoki shook his head at Kitsuchi and the other Iwakure shinobi, signaling them to disperse. He turned to Sosuke and said weakly, "The ninja master's strength truly is as formidable as the rumors said. It's admirable." Sosuke's power was undeniable. After all, he had defeated Hiruzen Sarutobi, but Onoki had not expected him to be this absurdly strong. He hadn't even begun to understand Sosuke's methods before being utterly defeated, and Sosuke had been holding back. In a real fight, Onoki might well have died. Onoki wasn't curious about how Sosuke had beaten Hiruzen so much as how Hiruzen had managed to get back to Konoha alive from Sosuke's hands. If Dust Release couldn't harm Sosuke, Hiruzen's ninjutsu certainly wouldn't have worked either. "Presumably for the shinobi sect," Onoki muttered. Onoki suspected Sosuke had spared Hiruzen to avoid a full-scale war with Konoha. Sosuke was terrifyingly strong, but he was still only one man. The great shinobi villages had countless elite shinobi. Sosuke could protect himself and kill many enemies, but he couldn't safeguard every shinobi sect member. A direct conflict would only bring mutual destruction. The sect would lose most of its people, and the villages would face the threat of Sosuke. Dust Release is worthy to be called a Kekkei Genkai above others. It really opened my eyes, Mu Yue said, giving the Tsuchikage his due. Onoki's mouth twitched. He found it difficult to take pleasure even at Sosuke's praise. Given how the fight had gone, he suspected Sosuke might have been sarcastic. Onoki hadn't breached Sosuke's defenses at all. Was Mu Yue's "opened my eyes" comment about the fact that Dust Release, supposedly capable of decomposing everything, hadn't even eaten through his clothing? "Village business is busy. I'll not take more of your time." Onoki forced a smile, refused the shinobi sect's attempts to see him off, and left with his subordinates. Mu Yue and the others watched him go. "He's a stubborn old man," Roshi sighed. Onoki's arm wound was bad, but he'd refused Sosuke's treatment out of pride. Roshi didn't understand. After such a crushing defeat, what pride was left? Was receiving help from an opponent so humiliating? "Baichuan, you're familiar with the Tsuchikage, aren't you?" Yahiko asked. Very few in the shinobi sect knew Roshi's true identity. Only Mu Yue, Nagato, and Kakuzu knew he was Iwagakure's Jinchuriki, while most recognized him only by his public name. "A little," Roshi answered briefly. He wasn't afraid of being exposed so much as of the trouble it could cause. Tailed beasts were vital to the 5 great shinobi villages. If Iwagakure discovered Baichuan had joined the shinobi sect, even if they feared Sosuke, they would take every measure they could against the sect. Yahiko accepted the reply and moved on, peppering Mu Yue with excited questions about the fight. After walking a short distance, Onoki signaled, and a medical jonin from Iwagakure immediately began treating him. Though he had prepared to do so sooner, Onoki had refused. "Lord Tsuchikage, shall we still agree to the Hidden Sand Village's cooperation?" Kitsuchi finally asked in the quiet that followed. Watching Sosuke fight had clarified why Konoha had reacted so little when news of Hiruzen's defeat spread. What could they do? Sending troops would only cost lives and earn the ire of a peerless expert. "Let's hold off for now," Onoki decided after a moment. His issue with the shinobi sect was that its growth could affect Iwagakure's interests. Acting now alongside the sand would risk angering Sosuke and likely produce no decisive victory for Iwagakure. Fortunately, they had made no commitments, so they owed the sand village no explanations. Onoki felt a pang of bitter envy. He had assumed that after the era of the ninja god, such geniuses would be gone. Yet here was Sosuke, and Mu Yue too, potential monsters in their own right. Why did Konoha seem to produce one prodigy after another, Hashirama, Madara, and now Mu Yue? It depressed him. After half an hour of reatment, worried about complications, Onoki returned to Iwagakure without delay and convened a high-level meeting to relay what he'd learned. The gathered elders and commanders, listening to his report, were visibly shocked. Had the intelligence not come from their own Tsuchikage, some would have doubted its truth. Konoha is devious. No wonder they hid it, Elder Muka said. They probably intended to use the Shinobi sect to strike at us. If Iwagakure blindly clashed with the sect, we'd suffer terribly, Elder Choki added, his voice trembling. We'd be blamed for weakening the village. We should let the other villages and the Shinobi sect fight each other to mutual destruction, the Jonin squad leader suggested. Iwagakure might be the only one fully aware of the situation, which gave them a dangerous advantage. The sand has its own designs. Instead of joining them in a frontal attack, we can cooperate with them in other areas to mislead them. Let the sand and the Shinobi sect wear each other down. Onoki considered the plan and nodded. If it worked, it would kill two birds with one stone, neutralize the Shinobi sect's threat while weakening the sand. Land of Fire, Konohagakure, Hokage Building. When news of a high-level meeting reached them, Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado hurried to the conference room. No matter their private feelings about the new Hokage, this was Mu Yue's first high-level meeting and they had to appear. On the way, they met Hiruzen Sarutobi. The three exchanged greetings and went in together. Mu Yue and Minato had arrived early and nodded as the elders took their seats. Hiruzen's eyes flicked to the documents on the table. Of the 5 seats, only Mu Yue's place lacked paperwork. Ninja School Reform. Hiruzen read the title with a hint of curiosity. The ninja school was where he'd first noticed Mu Yue, and he knew Mu Yue had a fondness for teaching. If Mu Yue had brought this up, it was likely more than a minor tweak. Minato, I'll trouble you, Mu Yue said. Minato Namikaze cleared his throat and began. We propose changing the current 6-year ninja school system to a 4-year elementary level, plus a new 3-year middle school. Graduates of the elementary level will no longer be qualified to become genin. They must complete and graduate from the middle school to become official ninjas. As Minato spoke, Hiruzen and the others flipped through the papers. Utatane Koharu's brow tightened. The change was drastic. It effectively overturned the old system, required greater village investment, and lengthened training. Assistant Minato, please pause, Koharu said bluntly. What exactly is wrong with the current system? Why such a major reform? The 6-year system would become 7 years. Have you calculated the additional cost and how many fewer shinobi we'd field annually? The middle school even requires mastery of a C-rank ninjutsu. This raises the bar for teachers as well. The extra expenses won't be small, she added. Minato remained composed. Mu Yue had asked him to present, and he had prepared. The current ninja school's instruction is too lenient, and the quality of genin varies greatly, he said. He'd inspected the school and compiled the data. Koharu's indignation surprised him, but her point, Konoha had produced many excellent shinobi, was hard to dismiss. Is it possible, Mu Yue interjected calmly, that we could have produced even more outstanding shinobi? Or do you believe Konoha should be content with the status quo and not strive for better, Advisor Koharu? Koharu was momentarily speechless. Mu Yue's bluntness put her on the defensive. She could not afford to appear stagnant. Hiruzen laughed lightly and cut through the tension. The past can't be changed. Let's focus on the reform. To Hiruzen, both Mu Yue and Koharu had overstepped. Mu Yue's tone lacked deference to an elder, and Koharu's resistance to the new Hokage at the first meeting was blunt. Minato glanced at Mu Yue for confirmation, and seeing him nod, continued. Homura Mitokado then spoke up. Reform may improve the quality of graduates, but is the improvement worth the cost? He sided with Koharu. Mu Yue's assertiveness was a threat to their standing. He'd accepted Mu Yue as Hokage only because Hiruzen had assured him 6 years in office. If their influence were diminished now, what value was their position? Hiruzen read the documents in silence. If this had been someone else's proposal, he might have sided with the elders, but Mu Yue's reforms had rarely been wrong. He felt pulled between loyalty to old friends and responsibility to the village's future. If he openly backed Mu Yue now, it would look like he'd abandoned his peers, something he couldn't bring himself to do. For the moment, he kept quiet, thinking another meeting could finalize the decision. 694. Tough Mu Yue. Then let me ask you, Advisor Homura, are you aware of the costs this reform will require? Mu Yue didn't answer Homura Mitokado's accusation. He turned the question back on him. Homura opened his mouth to reply, and then found himself listing expenses instead. An extra year of schooling, the increased number of classes and grades, the need for more teachers and higher teacher salaries, plus the construction of new school buildings and classrooms. Before he could finish, Mu Yue glanced at Minato Namikaze. Minato stood up, produced a small booklet, and set it on the table in front of Homura. Revision of elementary textbooks, compilation of new middle school materials, school expansions. Minato began to tick off items. Everything Homura had mentioned was in the booklet, and everything he hadn't mentioned, Minato had already accounted for. Homura leafed through the pages and realized Mu Yue and his team had already estimated the costs for each item. So you know it will consume so much manpower and money, Homura said, pressing his point. Why push ahead with it? Even if the budget were available, who can guarantee the quality of future students? Mu Yue, you might be a great teacher, but you're the Hokage now. You can't personally teach at the academy. The second Hokage's ninja school became a model across the shinobi world. For decades, no village has attempted major reforms. Doesn't that prove the system is fine as it is? Mu Yue lifted his teacup, and since Homura wanted to argue, didn't hold back. Physical training increases the body's requirements. More exercise means more food and higher costs. Advisor Homura, didn't you exercise when you were young? Before Homura could insist the comparison was unfair, Mu Yue continued. Fortunately, Advisor, you were born at the very end of the Warring States period. If you had been born earlier, perhaps the idea of a ninja school wouldn't have been proposed by Konoha at all. When the second Hokage first established the ninja school, everyone else was still using the Warring States cultivation methods. By your logic, since everyone was using those methods, they must have been excellent, and there would have been no need for a ninja school. Homura's mouth tightened. Mu Yue's words were neither loud nor rude, yet the implication was blunt. His position was short-sighted. Utatane Koharu's eyes shifted. Mu Yue's normally gentle manner had a piercing sharpness in it today. If the other villages don't change and we don't change, how can Konoha set itself apart? Mu Yue tapped the table to emphasize the point. Though his original aim had been a practical reform, he now invoked a broader purpose as well. Hiruzen Sarutobi fell silent, thinking. Konoha was strong now and had an even stronger future, but how much of that future depended on Mu Yue himself? Mu Yue was both powerful and an exceptional teacher who had already produced many promising students. If Mu Yue were gone and no new Mu Yue emerged, could Konoha keep that edge? Hiruzen could not be sure. When Senju Hashirama had been alive, the world was peaceful. After his death, wars flared, and Konoha was drawn into conflict. Hiruzen hoped history wouldn't repeat itself. He understood the risks, but hesitated to speak in Mu Yue's favor. Before Hiruzen could speak, Mu Yue looked at Minato and said, "Minato, continue." Minato nodded, put more documents on the table, and went on. That covers the middle school reform. Beyond middle school, we propose establishing a university. It would be a 3-year program, and only middle school graduates who meet certain academic requirements could advance. Hiruzen, who had been about to speak, closed his mouth. 10 years of schooling from elementary through university felt like an eternity to him. In the Warring States period, children were on battlefields young. The duration alone made him uneasy. The university would divide students by specialization according to talent and interest, Minato explained. For example, those strong in fire release would enter a fire release, track. Homura's expression shifted to alarm. This went into detailed ninjutsu attributes, specializations, graduation tasks, and training stages more meticulous than even chuunin and jonin guidance. When Homura read the proposal for the university, he lost his composure. They even planned a sealing techniques department. This time, Homura didn't interrupt. He waited, realizing the plan was surprisingly mature. Clearly, Mu Yue hadn't thrown it together on the spot. This was long-prepared material. When Minato finished, Homura fired his obvious objection. "Assistant Minato, this university is meant to cultivate elite shinobi, isn't it?" Minato nodded. Mu Yue's design assumed roughly 70% of students would be eliminated between middle school and university. The academy currently graduated just over 200 students a year. In wartime, it might rise to 300 or 400. With that elimination rate, at most 100 or so would enter university each year, then be further subdivided. Each specialization would have only a handful of students. But to cultivate so few elites at such tremendous cost, that's unreasonable, Homura complained. Compared to the resources the university required, the middle school reforms seemed trivial. If Konoha built such a university now, Homura declared, it could bankrupt itself. Establishing a university does cost a lot, Mu Yue agreed. This wouldn't be an ordinary university. If anything, it would be a top-tier institution requiring many jonin instructors, people whose prowess could tip the balance against smaller states. The plan is imperfect, and that's why we're discussing it. We'll refine it until it's practical. I believe that with thorough discussion, we can reach an outcome that satisfies everyone. He smiled gently as he spoke. Utane Koharu and Homura exchanged looks, beginning to see Mu Yue's strategy. He had floated the idea of a grand university, likely not for immediate implementation, but by offering it, he gave his opponents a target to oppose. That left the middle school reform looking far more modest and practical by comparison. Homura cleared his throat. Reform is necessary, but it must be practical. Changing the school system to elementary plus middle school is feasible. As for the university, now is not the right time. Mu Yue's firmness today surprised Homura. In earlier high-level meetings he had rarely spoken up. Now his assertiveness was decisive. Hiruzen's hesitation, combined with the two advisors, could not outmatch the Hokage backed by his capable assistant. Utatane also softened. Her earlier misjudgment of Mu Yue, expecting a gentler, younger third Hokage, was replaced by the realization he could be blunt and uncompromising when needed. She felt a bit chastened. Mu Yue reminded her more of a tougher, younger Danzo than the third Hokage she had envisioned. Finally, Hiruzen spoke. The quality of Konoha's genin must improve. This will raise Konoha's potential. With that, the high-ranking officials reached a consensus, and Mu Yue's ninja school reform passed. After the meeting, Minato and Mu Yue walked back to the Hokage office together. Mu Yue, that was amazing. It went almost exactly as you predicted, Minato praised. Mu Yue smiled and sat down. Because they're predictable, he said. Before the meeting, they had rehearsed responses and anticipated the other officials' objections. Even facing elders twice his age, he hadn't panicked. Minato shook his head. It's not just prediction. You also provided solutions. That takes political skill. Mu Yue was modest. I studied a bit. I watched political dramas frame by frame, read realistic political novels, and even asked advice from a retired official in the family. But more importantly, my strength and reputation make them harder to push around. People calculate consequences. If the advisors completely antagonize me, how will their families fare in Konoha? They won't give young people chances willingly. They cling to power. I don't mind sharing power, but they've held office for ages, and I haven't seen many useful contributions. For Mu Yue, the decisive factor had been a mix of preparation, attitude, and the authority his strength afforded him. Night. Shisui and Obito walked to the Nanga Shrine for an Uchiha clan meeting. Obito didn't usually attend, but Shisui had said something important, so he came along. Obito, if you want to be Hokage, improving yourself isn't enough. You need support, Shisui said on the way. He'd helped Obito before and wanted to help further. For example, there are over 20 jonin in the clan. If all of them backed you, that's 20+ votes right there. That's true, Obito said, understanding the clan's influence. That poker-faced uncle had only 28 votes in total. He meant to say you could build a lot of leverage through the clan's internal weight. Of course, I'm only using an example. I don't want you to exhaust your energy fighting within the clan. If you're a candidate, the Uchiha Jonin will likely vote for you out of clan loyalty, Shisui cautioned. The Uchiha had strong family ties. Even if they weren't close to Obito, they'd support a namesake candidate. I know. I'm just thinking about how to act, Obito replied. Then an idea struck him. What if I used a bunch of shadow clones to help the elderly in the village? His eyes lit up. If he won the hearts of Konoha's elders, that could sway broader public opinion. Grandparents and mothers influence many votes. Shisui blinked. Was that still the Land of Fire language? He felt like he didn't quite understand Obito's logic, but smiled at the enthusiasm anyway. When they reached the Nanga shrine, many Uchiha greeted them. Within the clan, strength outranked seniority. Facing stronger members, lower-ranking people were quick to show respect. There were so many greetings the two simply nodded and entered the shrine. Suspend some of the police force ninjas' activities and let them accept commissioned missions as Konoha ninja, Uchiha Fugaku announced. It was the topic he'd put forward for the meeting. Uchiha Fugaku's words hit like a bomb, and an uproar rippled through the Uchiha gathered below. Why suspend the police force's activities? Is the leadership in Konoha trying to undermine the police force? Who exactly will be suspended? Chuunin and Jonin serving in the police force, and even Genin, who hoped to join, voiced their confusion and concern. They assumed the upper echelons were moving to suppress the Uchiha. Fugaku looked toward Shisui. This reaction showed how closely the Uchiha still identified with the police force. If anyone wanted them separated, the clan itself would be the first to object. Shisui rose and held up a hand. Everyone, quiet down. Listen to me. Faces fell silent, and eyes turned to him. Though younger than many elders, Shisui's power and accomplishments had earned him weight in the clan. No one disliked a fellow Uchiha who was strong and loyal. First, this is only a temporary suspension of activities for some of the police force 9. Temporary, not a stripping of rank, Shisui said. Second, this isn't some conspiracy by the leadership to take authority away. The 4th Hokage trusts the strength of our clan. Murmurs of confusion persisted. How could trust translate into suspending duties? After the war, Konoha received a lot of high-quality missions, Shisui continued. There are more lucrative jobs than we can handle, and our mission completion rate has dropped. The 4th Hokage believes our Uchiha are capable. In peacetime, limiting you to internal security wastes that talent. So he wants a number of capable Uchiha nin to temporarily step away from police duties and take on those missions, showing clients the village's strength. The grumblings about persecution died away. The tone around the courtyard shifted. Am I on the list? A confident Uchiha Jonin blurted out. He believed his experience made him an obvious pick. Shisui nodded. For steady Jonin who weren't too eccentric, the chance of selection was real. Shisui had intended his plan to reform the police force, but Konoha also needed competent Jonin for these assignments. The selected men straightened, proud of the recognition. Clan head, Shisui, am I on the list? Others clamored. Those named smiled with new confidence. Those not named looked reluctant. Obito watched with mild amusement how quickly expressions could flip. First they felt wronged. A few praise-filled words and they were honored. Don't worry if you're not on this first list, Shisui reassured them. This is the initial trial. If it succeeds, more capable Uchiha will be chosen to help build Konoha's strong image. His real aim was to decouple the Uchiha from the police force, leave only a minority to avoid the impression that the force belonged entirely to the clan. Presented the right way, the proposal met with broad assent. The elders offered no objection. Their support was evident. After the meeting, Fugaku had Shisui and Obito, both experienced in handling high-level missions, speak on teamwork. Team atmosphere matters, Shisui told those selected. If a team is united, a mission takes half the effort and achieves twice the result. If not, expect the opposite, and the mission itself will be more dangerous. The chosen Uchiha listened gravity-faced. Despite being younger, Shisui and Obito had earned their respect. The next day brought an unexpected event. The 4th Hokage personally came to inspect the Uchiha clan, accompanied by his assistant, Minato Namikaze. Such attention from the Hokage was rare. Previous leaders had relied on Anbu to keep tabs. Lord 4th, many of the Uchiha greeted him with respectful bows. They remembered why some of them had supported Mu Yue at the Jonin meeting. He inspired a new kind of regard. How's the police force's work? Do you find it relaxing or taxing? Mu Yue smiled. Not tiring. For us Uchiha, this workload is far from exhausting. A young Uchiha Chuunin replied confidently. If I recall, your name is Uchiha Inaho, Mu Yue said. Keep it up. Maybe that name will spread across the land of fire. Inaho's eyes widened. The Hokage had called his name. He felt genuinely honored. Mu Yue went on. Every Uchiha temporarily leaving the police force to take missions must be approved by me. He then called out the names of each Uchiha slated to leave, Yakumi, Aosui, and others, accurately and without affectation. Being acknowledged by the Hokage thrilled the selected 9. We must complete our assignments well and not disappoint the 4th Hokage, they thought, proud and motivated. Mu Yue's obvious respect for the clan, a contrast to some of the earlier Hokages, lifted morale. Even the coldest Uchiha forced a smile. Minato observed this, surprised. Is this still the Uchiha clan I knew? Fugaku led Mu Yue and Minato through the clan territory. This is our training ground. Countless police force nin have trained here day and night to keep Konoha's order, Fugaku explained. Very good, Mu Yue praised. Konoha's long peace owes much to the Uchiha. They toured patrols and the police force before returning to the clan hall. Mu Yue summarized the inspection in a speech that, were the Leaf newspaper to report it, would read, "The 4th Hokage commended the Uchiha's work ethic, affirmed their contribution to Konoha's public order, and hoped they would play an even greater role in the new era, helping to build a safe, harmonious, and prosperous village." In plain terms, Mu Yue praised the clan and backed Shisui's plan. With Uchiha unity and the Hokage's endorsement, the policy, beneficial to both Konoha and the Uchiha, went into effect quickly. Several jonin and capable chuunin temporarily left the police force and were assigned to teams to handle high-profile missions. With these Uchiha added, the village's mission income should rise significantly, Minato remarked to Mu Yue. He felt encouraged. Despite his recent busyness, he could see Konoha moving in the right direction. That sense of accomplishment, helping the village thrive, meant more to him than any personal advancement, even more than breakthroughs like the breathing technique. That won't necessarily change the advisors' salaries, Mu Yue said with a shake of his head. Collective gains and individual benefits don't always align. There were people like Danzo Shimura, who often acted to strengthen their own power at Konoha's expense. Minato's idealized view of the leadership had already been dented since becoming the 4th's assistant, but he still believed the higher-ups wouldn't deliberately harm the village. Mu Yue changed the subject. I want you to take me to Mount Myoboku. Minato blinked. Mount Myoboku? Mu Yue nodded. His space-time technique had reached a proficient level. His skill was sufficient to keep him safe. It was time to pursue Sage Mode. 696. Asking for monthly votes first. Happy National Day to everyone, and long live our motherland. Now a few words about how the book is doing. Right now, I'm 769 average subscriptions away from reaching my dream of 20,000 average subscriptions. 769 sounds small, but for a story already over 2 million words, it's actually a tough gap to close. The more words there are, the harder it becomes to raise average subscriptions. That's why I'm asking for monthly votes this month, to try to get more exposure through the monthly votes ranking. I even changed the title as an experiment to see if a new name might attract new readers. Hitting 20,000 average subscriptions for a fanfic is genuinely difficult. Like I always say, you have to decide whether this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Since I'm asking for monthly votes, I don't want it to be just shameless begging. I need to give you something worth voting for. I can't promise what the whole month will look like. I have a full-time job and can't write all day like a full-time author. But for the 7 days of National Day, I guarantee updates of about 7,000 to 8,000 characters per day. If I fall short, I'll make it up. During those 7 days, I won't go out. I'll stay home and write intensively. For other holidays this month, I'll also do my best to match that National Day output and try to increase my update volume. Finally, said 3 times for emphasis, please give me monthly votes. Please give me monthly votes. Please give me monthly votes. Going to Mount Myoboku? Mu Yue, are you planning to learn Sage Mode? Minato Namikaze asked. He already knew Mu Yue had an interest. Mu Yue had even sought out Jiraiya to inquire about it. Yes, thank you, Minato. Mu Yue nodded. Sage Mode was one of the few reliable ways to boost his power besides the system's reward brush. He didn't just want to learn Mount Myoboku's version. He intended to study the Sage Modes of all 3 great sacred places and, if possible, combine their strengths into a new form. The original Sage Modes came from the tailed beasts, and those methods might not be optimal for humans. Even if his experiments failed, learning each Sage Mode would still be valuable. Minato looked puzzled. It's not a problem, but Mu Yue, if you want to learn Sage Jutsu, Why didn't you sign a contract with Mount Myoboku first? Ordinarily, a person trying to form a summoning contract with Mount Myoboku had to find the place and pass trials. People who were already recognized by Mount Myoboku, like Minato, could have someone sign the blood pact directly. Given Fukasaku and Shima's attitude toward Mu Yue, Minato thought Mu Yue should be able to go to Mount Myoboku immediately after signing. For various reasons, Mu Yue said after a moment. The great Toad Sage was mysterious and had prophetic abilities. Mu Yue didn't want contact before he could protect himself. Now he felt safer. After all, his celibacy could travel through time. I see. Then sign the 9-beast blood pact first. It'll make coming and going much easier. Minato didn't press for details and prepared the summoning contract scroll. Besides summoning creatures, the summoning technique had practical uses. Used in reverse, it could teleport a person to the summoning site if the conditions allowed. Mount Myoboku was far from Konoha, hidden in the world. Walking there would waste a lot of time. Reverse summoning would make travel convenient. Minato could summon a Mount Myoboku toad and have it summon Mu Yue back. Minato quickly spread the summoning scroll. Mu Yue thanked him, sliced his right index finger, wrote his name on the scroll, performed a hand seal, and channeled chakra. Summoning technique. White smoke burst forth. A green elderly toad with long, bushy white eyebrows appeared, sprawled on the ground. Fukasaku leapt up, blinking. Oh, little Minato and little Mu Yue. Little Minato, did you summon me for something? It wasn't me. Mu Yue did, Minato explained. Little Mu Yue signed a contract with us. Fukasaku's surprise turned into a smile. As expected, he summoned me on the first try. Come to Mount Myoboku often. My wife's been hoping to learn cooking from you. Fukasaku had always wanted Mu Yue to visit. If Mu Yue could make tasty dishes from ingredients humans preferred, imagine what he could do with the things the toads liked. I'll teach cooking, Mu Yue said, smiling. Also, I want to learn Sage Jutsu, so we can trade skills. Learning Sage Jutsu? Fine. I'm fairly free lately. When do you want to start? Fukasaku asked. I can go now. Mu Yue had grown accustomed to acting quickly in the ninja world. Then tell me when you're ready, and I'll have them prepare. Fukasaku turned to Minato. Little Minato, do you want to come along? You could learn Sage Jutsu too. I'll wait until Mu Yue finishes, Minato declined. Mu Yue's training would demand attention. As Konoha's acting fire shadow, Minato needed to stay and manage the village. Fukasaku bowed and canceled the summoning. Learning Sage Jutsu wasn't simple. The toads didn't push anyone into it. They recommended it only for favored contract holders. After settling things, Mu Yue packed a few things, summoned Fukasaku, and they went to Mount Myoboku. The reverse summoning felt almost like the Flying Thunder God technique. Mu Yue immediately took in his surroundings upon arrival. Towering, unfamiliar plants dotted the landscape. He had never seen these in his previous life or in the Land of Fire. Giant, colorful mushrooms grew everywhere. Whether humans could eat them was another matter. Let's go see my wife. She misses you, little Mu Yue. Fukasaku led him home. Oh, little Mu Yue is here. Welcome. Shima greeted mid-preparation. It's almost dinner. Let me know if my cooking's improved. Practice is best after a big meal, Fukasaku agreed. But hospitality meant they couldn't force a guest to cook their first time. Mu Yue, however, offered, I'll cook. I haven't used these ingredients before. Shima protested, but relented under Mu Yue's insistence. When they tasted his bug dish, Fukasaku was stunned. In 800 years, he had never eaten bugs so delicious. Shima devoured it with enthusiasm, and Fukasaku soon followed. Mu Yue's cooking had bought him plenty of goodwill. After the meal, it was time to train. Fukasaku led Mu Yue to a clearing filled with giant toad statues and began to explain Sage Mode's principles and precautions. Though Mu Yue had studied the Naruto stories, reality was richer than fiction. He listened closely. Chakra, Fukasaku explained, is a balanced mixture of two energies, spiritual and physical. Sage Chakra adds a third, natural energy. The key is maintaining an even three-way balance, one part spiritual, one part physical, one part natural. The first step is perceiving natural energy. Without that perception, you can't absorb or control it. That's why training must take place at sacred sites. Mount Myoboku, for example, had toad oil that aided in gathering natural energy. With the oil, a trainee could skip first learning to perceive natural energy. The oil would attract it into the body, allowing the practitioner to feel it and learn how to control it more quickly. It was a shortcut, but risky. You could use the oil. It's faster, but riskier, Fukasaku warned. He usually didn't recommend oil. Using it required him to watch the trainee closely and be ready with a special rod to disperse excess natural energy. The toads received no reward for teaching, so Fukasaku had little incentive to take such responsibility. Mu Yue, however, had just cooked for them and impressed them, so Fukasaku was more willing to be involved. "I'll pass for now. I want to try perceiving natural energy on my own," Mu Yue replied. He didn't like the idea of entrusting his safety to someone else. Besides, he wasn't rushing to face an emergency like Naruto. He could take his time. His ultimate goal was to develop a new sage mode, and thoroughly understanding Mount Myoboku's method was the right place to start. Fukasaku outlined the first requirement: stillness. Not just standing still, but becoming one with nature, feeling the earth and sky, sensing the flow of natural energy. After 2 hours of instruction, he had Mu Yue try to perceive and absorb natural energy. "Don't rush," Fukasaku said. "This first step is the longest and the most important." Then he froze. Natural energy gathered and flowed into Mu Yue as if drawn by a magnet. Fukasaku's eyes widened. Perceiving and absorbing natural energy on the first try, this was a rarity in 800 years. Mu Yue himself was a little surprised at his own aptitude. 10 seconds later, Mu Yue frowned and deliberately stopped the Mount Myoboku guiding method. He halted the absorption and dispersed the natural energy already in his body. For some reason, the natural energy had been conflicting, repelling within him and disrupting his chakra synthesis. Still, a small stream of natural energy continued to leak in. He was no longer relying on the toad's method. In the transparent world state, Mu Yue quickly understood why. His breathing technique, his constant lightning breathing, had been absorbing natural energy in a way different from Mount Myoboku's method. Had the breathing technique always done this, and he just never noticed because he couldn't perceive natural energy before? If his breathing technique could absorb natural energy, creating a new sage mode might be simpler than he'd imagined. To test it, Mu Yue stopped the breathing technique and exited transparent world. Relying only on Mount Myoboku's method, his perception dropped drastically. What had felt like ultra-high clarity fell to a lower resolution. Though reduced, he could still perceive, absorb, and control natural energy. This time, there were no conflicts, and he condensed sage chakra smoothly. "You're amazing, little Mu Yue," Fukasaku exclaimed. This was the first time in his long career that someone had condensed sage chakra so quickly without using toad oil. If Mu Yue kept progressing like this, he might master sage mode in days. Fukasaku's expression turned serious. "Little Mu Yue, did you have trouble earlier? You stopped once before restarting." Natural energy is external and fundamentally different from internal spiritual and physical energy. Its rewards are great, but so are its risks. Any strange symptoms during training must be treated cautiously. Mu Yue, the sage. After I learned to sense natural energy, I realized my breathing technique can actually draw it in, Mu Yue said after a moment's thought. But it seems the breathing technique conflicts with Mount Myoboku's secret. If used together, they interfere with each other. Fukasaku, an 800-year-old sage who had mastered sage ninjutsu, listened without surprise. "Is that so? Then try using only your breathing technique to absorb natural energy," he suggested, intrigued. Fukasaku closed his eyes, gathered his chakra, and keyed his senses to Mu Yue. Mu Yue concentrated on his breathing, slipped into the transparent world state, and let the breathing technique pull natural energy into his body. He found that keeping the breathing technique running caused the absorbed natural energy to be incorporated into the technique's circulation, which amplified the physical enhancement the breathing technique provided. Other than increased bodily strain, there were no immediate adverse effects. Encouraged, Mu Yue pushed deeper, entering his lightning-breathing chakra mode. The breathing technique's pull on natural energy strengthened considerably, but it still couldn't rapidly gather and synthesize huge amounts of natural energy into sage chakra the way Mount Myoboku's method could. It only improved the breathing technique's boost to his physical abilities. "So that's it," Fukasaku said, eyes brightening. "Your breathing technique has a bit of a sage ninjutsu prototype to it. That means it definitely shouldn't be used at the same time as another sage mode. Using two different schools of sage mode at once is like trying to perform a monkey-style taijutsu with one hand and a tiger style with the other. You'll create conflict. Little Mu Yue, don't use that breathing technique while you cultivate sage mode, Fukasaku warned, growing serious. If I'm here, I can help disperse any uncontrolled natural energy, but if I'm not, a rampage of natural energy could cost you your life. Understood. Could you explain why that happens? Mu Yue asked. He was cautious by nature. He hadn't continued his experimentation earlier because he felt the danger. Fukasaku nodded and began to explain. Sage mode is, at its core, a ninjutsu that temporarily makes a human into a sage. Different schools of sage mode make a person emulate different kinds of sages. Mount Myoboku's training tends toward frog-like transformation, while another, like Ryuchido Cave, leans towards snake-like changes. It's the same reason you can't cultivate two completely different methods at once. There will be conflict. Mu Yue considered that. It matched his impressions. The breathing technique and Mount Myoboku's method were fundamentally incompatible. He suppressed his breathing technique and dedicated himself fully to learning sage mode. He needed to master one path before attempting to develop his own. The next morning, Fukasaku led Mu Yue to a plateau filled with tall, jutting rock spikes. The key to sage chakra is balance, Fukasaku said. If there's too little natural energy, it's just ordinary chakra. If there's too much, you risk turning into a toad. If you can condense sage chakra here, in this harsh place, then your control will be sound. Fukasaku handed Mu Yue a wooden board. With several agile leaps, Mu Yue climbed to the top of a narrow spike, placed the board, and sat steady. Fukasaku took a board and sat on the neighboring spike, watching in silence. Under Fukasaku's gaze, natural energy flowed into Mu Yue and began to synthesize into sage chakra. When the balance reached the right level, Mu Yue opened his eyes. Orange-yellow markings appeared around them, and his pupils narrowed into yellow horizontal slits. Sage facial markings, no sign of frog-like transformation. Little Mu Yue, you've already surpassed Jiraiya, Fukasaku exclaimed in amazement. Fukasaku explained that looking more like a sage physically, showing excessive frog-like traits for example, wasn't necessarily a sign of better cultivation. In fact, too much of that appearance of 10 meant poor balance. Mu Yue checked his skill bar. Sage mode had already reached a proficient level. Back on solid ground, Fukasaku asked, do you want to learn more of Mount Myoboku's unique Sage ninjutsu, or head back? You are already considered a Sage. Mu Yue shook his head. I want to learn the theory behind sage mode from you first. He didn't need all of Mount Myoboku's techniques. He had time and wanted to understand the principles. Fukasaku settled down to explain. As I said, sage mode lets a human temporarily become a sage. Natural energy and sage chakra are central to that. Natural energy is the most potent form of energy in the ninja world, part of the world itself. Fukasaku's knowledge ran deep, and much of what he told Mu Yue about natural energy and sage chakra was new and useful, especially for someone thinking about developing a new kind of sage mode. Mu Yue stayed until the morning of the third day, finally exiting his enlightenment state and preparing to return to Konoha. Why are you leaving so soon? Do you have a mission? Shima asked, reluctant to see him go. She'd enjoyed the past 2 days and thought her cooking had improved. No, Fukasaku replied. Little Mu Yue has completed his sage mode training. But it's only been 2 days, Shima said, astonished. I forgot to mention, this boy is a super genius at sage ninjutsu. The first time he trained, he could sense natural energy without using toad oil, Fukasaku said with pride. Teaching sage mode in 2 days without oil, that was a record. Shima groaned. If I'd known he was leaving, I would have taken a dish to the great toad sage last night. Fukasaku's face fell as he remembered he'd forgotten to offer their special dish to the great toad sage. Mu Yue, who had been asking questions non-stop to make full use of enlightenment, had kept Fukasaku occupied. I'll come back to learn again in 5 days, Mu Yue said with a smile. In 5 days his enlightenment skill would be ready again, and he could continue to study rapidly. Don't be a stranger, Shima said brightly. Come whenever you like. Fukasaku added with a chuckle that aside from the great toad sage, he and Shima spent most of their time idling anyway. One last thing, Mu Yue, Fukasaku reminded him before the summons ritual. Never use your breathing technique to absorb natural energy while in sage mode. If you want to try anything new, come ask us at Mount Myoboku first. Understood. Thank you, Mu Yue replied sincerely. Sending him back required a little more coordination than arriving. They had to contact Minato Namikaze's side, so a sage there could use reverse summoning jutsu to bring Mu Yue to them. Did the great toad sage give any prophecies about such an exceptional ninja? Shima asked, curious. Fukasaku shook his head. The great toad sage can see some things in dreams, but he doesn't know everything. Prophecy depends on fate and destiny, not only strength. With farewells complete, Fukasaku arranged Mu Yue's return, and Mu Yue left Mount Myoboku, ready to continue his journey. 699. The powerful qualitative change brought by the immortal arts. Mu Yue, how does learning sage art feel? Is it difficult? Minato Namikaze asked, curious. It's all right, Mu Yue answered after a moment's thought, but I might still need to trouble you for a while longer. Minato smiled. No problem. When it's my turn to learn, I'll be the one asking for your help. They moved on to discuss the specific implementation of the Ninja Academy reform, the first major decision after taking office and one that could shape Konoha's future. Minato was determined to make it a success. After the meeting, Mu Yue returned to the Hokage's office, dispelled the shadow clone working there, formed another clone, and then departed Konoha with the Flying Thunder God technique. Now that he'd mastered Sage Mode, he wanted to test how it amplified his other abilities. How much would Armed Color Haki be strengthened when powered with Sage Chakra? How much would ordinary ninjutsu increase if Sage Mode were stacked with a breathing technique Chakra Mode? Would special natures like Limitless be altered by Sage Chakra? Sage Mode was like a magnifying glass. No change to the techniques was required. Simply switch the chakra used to Sage Chakra, and the effect was brutally direct. Mount Myoboku, however, was Toad territory, and Mu Yue's techniques were powerful enough to attract trouble, so he headed elsewhere. He traveled swiftly to the remote mountains of the southern Land of Fire, an economically poor area with plenty of uninhabited ranges, ideal for loud tests. He landed and stood still, absorbing natural energy. Sage Chakra gathered as he slipped into Sage Mode. Immediately after, he focused his flame breathing and entered flame breathing chakra mode. When using a breathing technique, Mu Yue concentrated mainly on the breath itself and filtered out the portion of natural energy the breathing form would normally absorb, so that his Sage Mode reserve wouldn't be consumed by the breath's own process. A breathing form enhanced by natural energy would be stronger than usual, but it wouldn't match stacking Sage Mode with a breathing technique chakra mode. As expected, everything's amplified, Mu Yue murmured, feeling vast, relentless power rising inside him. Because flame-breathing chakra mode burned Sage Chakra directly, the amplification was even stronger. Sage Art, Fire Dragon Dance. He clapped his hands and poured a huge amount of Sage Chakra into flame, exhaling it all at once. A vast, searing blaze rolled outward, heat waves boiling the air. When the orange-red fire hit the ground, it crashed like a tidal wave. Temperatures skyrocketed, wood charred and cracked, then ignited instantly. Pillars of flame shot up, leaving only black ash. The forest was consumed at an astonishing speed, green life stripped away and replaced by endless crimson and ash. The soil itself blistered and cracked under the heat, as if the earth were crying out. Water release. Great exploding water colliding wave. Mu Yue switched to water breathing, entering water-breathing chakra mode to expend a large quantity of chakra and unleash a massive torrent of water that finally smothered the conflagration. Wood release, World of Trees advent. He then used wood release to grow a new forest, returning the scorched land to lush green. That was an enormous consumption, Mu Yue breathed. He had automatically dropped out of Sage Mode as soon as his Sage Chakra was spent. Fire Dragon Dance was already an ultimate, chakra-hungry fire release. Stack flame-breathing chakra mode on top of that, and it burned through his Sage reserve even faster. If that's the case, he thought, abilities like Blue Flame and Thoughtless Blade might only be usable once at that level, or maybe not even to full power. Both the single-instance upper limit of Sage Chakra and the duration of Sage Mode were problems. The duration was slightly easier to solve. Lacking a tailed beast like the Ninetales, Mu Yue could have Fukasaku perform the combination transformation technique with him, effect, Ively creating 2 long-lasting power banks to sustain Sage Mode in combat. But that had drawbacks. Fukasaku was an external ally with his own will, and in a conflict with powerful opponents, he might refuse to cooperate. Worse, Fukasaku could be injured, and the combination transformation interrupted. Relying on that wasn't ideal. Better to make up the shortcomings from within. Still, the power increase is massive, Mu Yue said, recalling the instant incineration of the forest. If he'd used Sage Chakra alone to perform Fire Dragon Dance, without the flame-breathing chakra mode burning Sage Chakra even faster, that would have been the normal Sage art intensity, and enough to wipe out an entire ninja squad. Only the fastest shinobi might escape. Even a top-tier water release user, like the 3rd Mizukage, would have no real chance of stopping flames of that caliber. Running would be their only hope. He formed 2 shadow clones and sent them off to absorb natural energy, while his main body also began to gather more Sage Chakra. Once again, he entered Sage Mode. Sage Art, Armed Color Haki. He converted a large amount of Sage Chakra into Yin-type Sage Chakra and cloaked his right fist in pitch-black Armed Color Haki. With a swing, he cracked the ground, opening fissures tens of meters long. Defense and offense have both improved a lot, he mused, but I wonder if it can withstand a truth-seeking ball. Truth-seeking balls nullified ninjutsu. Against ordinary ninjutsu, Mu Yue's combination of Armed Color Haki and Limitless let him absorb attacks unscathed, but Truth-seeking ball might be a different tier entirely. Would Sage Art change that? He pulled the Rokudo Shakujo from his system space. The staff, when infused with chakra, behaved similarly to a truth-seeking ball, perfect for testing. He gathered Sage Chakra into his left arm to form Armed Color Haki, then picked up the Shakujo with his right, infusing it with chakra and striking his left arm. Shadow clones couldn't even hold the staff once infused, so he had no choice but to hit himself. Bang! Pain lanced his left arm, but the Armed Color Haki didn't vanish. It held, though it didn't feel strong enough to directly repel a true truth-seeking ball. Probably he'd just not used enough chakra. After mending the damage with medical ninjutsu, Mu Yue activated Limitless with Sage Chakra and tossed a Flying Thunder God kunai. He then threw the Rokudo Shakujo toward the kunai's location and teleported to it using the Flying Thunder God technique. The staff stopped 1 centimeter in front of him, unable to advance further. As I thought, Mu Yue said, clenching the Rokudo Shakujo and returning it to his system space. Even a 6 paths level technique can give Sage Art Limitless trouble. If he hadn't increased the output of Limitless for that test, the staff might have pierced it as before. The good news, Limitless does benefit from Sage Mode and is stronger. The bad news, by mechanism, Sage Art Limitless might still be unable to fully suppress 6 paths level powers like a real truth-seeking ball, and might be breached. Still, it was overall good news. With enough Sage Chakra, taking a truth-seeking ball head-on wasn't a fantasy anymore. Mu Yue continued testing his stronger techniques. He tested Thoughtless Blade, and as expected, even after draining the last of his Sage Chakra, he couldn't reach the absolute limit of what he could unleash. Perfected Lightning Release Chakra Nature Transformation, perfected Lightning Breathing, and perfected Thoughtless Blade, stacked together, had an impressively high upper limit. Even if he didn't hit that ceiling, the power was already considerable. It was his most destructive, highest output combination. He didn't even dare to fully cleave after gathering it. After dispersing some of the built-up force, the environmental destruction was still extreme. Mu Yue let his breath out slowly, cataloging the results. The qualitative changes brought by the immortal arts were undeniable. They amplified everything, but the cost in Sage Chakra was air. Now his task was to find practical ways to sustain that power in the field without relying on fragile external supports. Under Mu Yue's plan, the Uchiha selected for the police force were all sent to their assigned teams. The Jonin Uchiha filled most of the team leader slots, while the Chuunin Uchiha served mainly as squad members. There was one small exception. Obito wasn't part of the police force, but he asked to take a provisional captaincy for a team, saying he wanted the practice to help him become Hokage. Mu Yue suspected Obito mostly wanted to taste being a captain after years of being overshadowed by Kakashi, but she didn't refuse. She assigned him a 3-person team that temporarily had no captain. It's finally my turn to be a captain, Obito thought as he walked toward the training field. It was only a small jonin captain position, just enough authority over 3 members, but to him it was a big step. He planned to show Kakashi how capable he'd become and prove to Rin he was improving. If his team members rose to jonin one day, that would be 3 more votes toward his future candidacy. The idea energized him as much as the sun. Kotetsu, Obito! Kotetsu Hagane spotted a familiar back and hurried to catch up, greeting him with enthusiasm. Among his Ninja Academy seniors, besides Ebisu, Kotetsu admired Obito and Metkai the most. He remembered the year Obito had gone from dead last to genius level. He'd risen fast, made jonin by 10, and had taken 2nd place in the youth martial arts tournament. Kotetsu jogged beside him, breathless with excitement. Long time, Kotetsu, Obito smiled. Are you training at the nearby ground today? Kotetsu asked. Something like that, Obito nodded. Before they could talk more, another voice chimed in. Kotetsu? Obito? Izumo Kamizuki, hesitant at first, had joined them. Kotetsu, yes, he's training over there today, Kotetsu explained as he turned back. Izumo's face brightened, and he greeted Obito with equal warmth. You were in the Hokage building at Mu Yue sensei's succession ceremony, right? I didn't see you outside, Izumo asked. Yeah, Obito admitted. I was inside, but it was a bad seat, way in the back. Kotetsu and Izumo exchanged envious looks. They'd been pushed out on the ground. Even Yoshio-sensei couldn't get inside the building. Kotetsu sighed. Yoshio Ishizaka, their jonin instructor, had been badly injured protecting them on the last mission. The 3 of them couldn't stop worrying about him. Let's go visit Yoshio-sensei after training this afternoon if we don't have a mission, Kotetsu suggested. Izumo and Anko Mitarashi nodded immediately. Yoshio had risked everything for them. They owed him that. Usually a provisional captain's first day is about getting to know the team, not running missions. Izumo said, pragmatic as always. Teamwork trumped individual skill. A coordinated trio could be far stronger than 3 soloists. Anko, however, was less interested in theory. Who cares about the usual? If he cooperates, fine. If not, we'll make sure he learns how formidable we are, she declared with undeniable bravado. All 3 were top chuunin whose coordination could rival most jonin. A regular jonin wouldn't easily overpower them. Yes, let him find out the power of our Mu Yue class trident. Kotetsu punched his fist into his palm. Izumo thought of something. If we attack him head-on and it gets back to Mu Yue sensei, it'll look bad. Better to play passive-aggressive, pretend to comply while subtly undermining him. Make him think we're obedient, then show him we're not. Nice, Kotetsu approved. How do we feign compliance? Simple. The first day, we act like we're researching his background. We use what he says to dig up other references, then let him find out we already knew. Make him feel our contempt quietly, Izumo explained. Kotetsu and Anko's eyes gleamed as they joined in, plotting variations and delights. They were practically celebrating the image of some arrogant jonin's pride being broken by their cleverness. Obito watched, amused. These younger ninja were more mischievous than he'd expected, useful material against Kakashi. They reached a small pavilion tucked beside the training field. We're here. See you later, Obito. Izumo and Kotetsu waved and left. Let's meet whenever you're free. I'll make you buy me dango, Anko teased as she hurried off, only to stop when she noticed Obito hadn't moved. You're staying? Izumo blinked. I've reached my destination too, Obito said, smiling. The smiles on Izumo's and Kotetsu's faces faded. Obito, you're training here? Anko bounced up. Perfect. If the jonin who shows up is strong, you'll help us, right? She giggled. Obito's grin widened, and instead of answering her question, he made a short, formal announcement. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Uchiha Obito, provisional captain of Team 6. Anko's eyes went wide, her smile evaporating. Izumo's voice turned cold in an instant. So that's it. We were just talking about how to deal with a captain, and this is the man? How shameful. A captain is still a captain. Obeying superior orders is a ninja's duty. I deliberately brought it up to see your true colors, and look at your schemes. Truly, the human heart has degenerated. Kotetsu wasn't far behind. No, you're the one with ulterior motives. I asked for ideas just to catch you out. I never expected you, Izumo, and Anko to be plotting like this already. Anko had gone from plotter to villain in a heartbeat and sat blinking, stunned. Obito struggled not to laugh. He'd expected the team roster to be interesting. Reality had exceeded his expectations. I was just bringing darkness to the surface to reveal the true darkness, Izumo protested. No, the darkness inside the light was coaxed out. Kotetsu shot back. Anko stayed silent, cheeks reddening. She fished a dango from her bag, held it out with both hands, and offered it to Obito. Captain Obito, treat. Just don't hit me. Hit them, not me, she said, genuinely earnest. The students weren't afraid of ordinary jonin, but Obito wasn't ordinary. Word in Konoha put his level on par with powerhouses. Being called captain felt like a charge of energy from his feet to his head. He'd planned to accept the dango, but seeing how anxious Anko looked, he declined and handed it back. He didn't want her to worry about one little sweet all night. Anko's face lit up immediately. Thank you, Captain Obito. She bit into the dango on the spot, happy. I'm not listening to slander. Anko was the most arrogant earlier, she protested, fully recovered. Setting aside truth, Anko definitely deserves a beating, Izumo and Kotetsu chimed in, aiming their teasing squarely at her. Obito laughed softly, then couldn't resist. He pressed his index and middle fingers together, flashed forward, and tapped each of their heads in rapid succession. Enough arguing, share a beating equally, he said with a smile. He'd intended to adopt a serious, commanding attitude to establish authority, but no matter how hard he tried, Obito couldn't conjure the stern, cold expression of Mu Yue in his memory. Mu Yue had always seemed gentle, so Obito dropped the act and enjoyed the simpler, gentler captain's role. He rubbed his fingers together, delighting in the small, familiar gesture, an imitation of Mu Yue's head tapping that felt oddly satisfying. You all know each other. No introductions needed. Let's start proper training, he said. I may be your senior, but as your captain, I won't go easy on you. He'd been through many fights and learned the profession was harsh. Soft training could lead to disaster later. Kotetsu, Izumo, and Anko stopped joking and straightened up. Bell taking, Obito declared, producing 2 small bells. As long as any one of you gets a bell, the team passes. Anko's eyes sparkled. Is there a reward? If there's a reward, there must be a punishment. Fail, and you'll do a test, Obito said after a beat. Anko froze. Tests after graduation? No thanks. Training is reward enough, she tried quickly, earnest. All right, no reward then, but the punishment is a test, Obito said, amused. Anko's horror was genuine, but Obito softened. If you get it today, I'll teach you, a ninjutsu or taijutsu. If it's fire release, I'll teach it myself. For other techniques, I'll find someone to teach you. They were, after all, Mu Yue's students. He couldn't be completely stingy. The trio's morale shot up. Some wanted ninjutsu, some just wanted to avoid a test. They trained hard, and with Obito deliberately easing up, the 3 nabbed the bells by sunset. If Obito had been serious, even 3 jonin would have struggled against him. But seeing them grin with success gave him a genuine, quiet satisfaction. I should captain a graduating genin team sometime, he mused. Maybe he could be someone's Mu Yue one day. Meanwhile, other Uchiha captains had varied beginnings. Uchiha Inaho, for instance, was a chuunin who'd recently awakened his Sharingan. His combat strength approached that of a jonin. Jonin were rare, and many had other duties, so experienced chuunin often took team leader slots. When Inaho first took over his 3 teammates, he felt a cool distance between them, as though they disapproved of him. Uchiha weren't naturally sociable, but they were keenly attuned to emotions, and Inaho felt the chill. In the past, he would have ignored it, let them misunderstand and spend his time training. But this time, he took a different tack. He acted on advice Shisui and Obito had given in a lecture. During practice, he pushed them hard with exacting standards. Afterwards, he bought the 3 a meal, checked over their injuries, and urged them to rest more. He knew missions weren't a one-man show. Even if their affection wasn't great, he couldn't let them hate him. He also didn't want to disappoint Lord Forth. The respect he'd earned could be lost if he led a mediocre team. The work paid off. A few days later, they took a routine B-rank mission and ran into trouble. The client had misrepresented the situation, leaving them at a disadvantage. Fortunately, Inaho was no ordinary chuunin. He used his strength and judgment, completed the mission, and then tore into the client for lying. After that, the teammates' attitudes shifted from distant politeness to enthusiasm and remorse. Back in Konoha, the three treated Inaho to drinks and barbecue. Over the meal, he learned why they'd kept their distance at first. Rumors about the Uchiha and the police force were nastier than he'd realized. I can't speak for all of them, but I can say, during my time with the police force, I never abused power or profited from it, Inaho said firmly. We trust you, Captain Inaho, his teammates replied. But when the police force was run entirely by Uchiha, people assumed the worst. We thought it was normal for corruption to happen. Now that they'd worked with him, they admitted those rumors were overblown. While this wouldn't immediately erase Konoha's suspicions about the Uchiha, it was a start. Little by little, people who actually teamed with the Uchiha began to see them differently. Their reputation was slowly shifting, step by step.